Following podcast contains spoilers, adult language, and cough.
I'm sorry, what?
Just, cough. See? I call it strawberry cough.
Hey, pull my finger.
Cut it out.
This is a message from the Office of Emergency Preparedness. Due to the recent crisis, we ask that you remain in your homes. Do not attempt to communicate or interact with the creatures, even if they are people you know.
Lock your doors. Bar your windows. The dead are coming. It's time for Aim for the Head, an all Walking Dead universe podcast. And now, here are your hosts, Diana and Steve.
Hi, and welcome back to Aim for the Head podcast. I'm Diana.
And I'm Steve.
I'm not going to pull your finger. Well, I physically can't because I'm far away. And this is podcast episode number 317. This week we're going to be discussing the apocalyptic classic Children of Men, which was released in 2006. And I know what you're doing. You're sitting there and you're thinking to yourself, but why, Diana? Why this movie? Why an apocalypse tale? Well, gather around and let me tell you. Well, here's the thing. So, we started out as a Walking Dead universe podcast, right? And we have always said that, Steve came at Walking Dead and its universe from one angle, and I came at it from my angle. I've never really been like a, there are horror movies that I enjoy, and we have probably discussed every single one of them at this point. But Steve has always been like the horror person. I came at The Walking Dead because I really enjoy tales of the world coming to an end and what is the next step. So all through the years, people was like, oh, you really dig zombies? And I'm like, not really. Like, that's not my thing. But the end of the world story is. And so when we have had time off in between series and have had time, you guys know we've covered so many things that were horror, zombie related, whether it's Kingdom, whether it's, we just did Hellraiser, we've covered other really great classic horror movies. And it was Steve's idea, which is a really great idea, that we should instead tap into my side of it, which is coming at the Walking Dead universe from the end of the world angle, the apocalypse angle. So he said to me, pick one and let's do it. So how did I come to this one? Is the
Really,
question.
that's where I am at. I'm like, really?
Right. And
okay.
I love that I'm so surprised. Like I picked the movie and Steve's like, okay. And then we went ahead and we did our thing and here we are. And we haven't had a chance to like hang out since then. We were supposed to, but we couldn't get it together. But anyway, my point is I didn't even realize he's very like, why this movie?
Mm-hmm.
What were you expecting me to pick? I'm very curious. What did you think I would pick?
My thought was, and I mean, it's probably my fault that I didn't explain what, like when I gave you my pitch of like, go pick an apocalypse movie, my brain was saying, clearly, you saw an early movie when you were a kid about the end of the world, whatever it was. And what was it that you're like, oh my God, I love this genre? And so I was expecting like maybe like one of the Mad Max movies from the 80s or, any of those things that came out back then, like The Day After or Threads or Testament or any of these nuclear war movies. I mean, any of all that stuff. And so then you come up with this thing from 2006 and I'm like, wow, okay, let's go, so.
Well, I have to say, so if you, so my reasoning between picking this one, and there are formative movies and I would say TV shows. I would say, to be fair, if you really want to know, because I'm not sure we would ever cover it because it's not a movie. The one that really, really informed me is the Twilight Zone episode with Burgess Meredith and the library. That's one of my
all the time in the world, or Time Enough to Last, I think it's called.
Yeah, exactly. That's probably one of my most formative apocalyptic stories that really, really, really just like has always been in the front of my brain when I think of the end of the world. And I'm like, that would be me. I'd be like, okay, great, everybody's gone. give me some books.
Yeah,
but
right.
what if my glasses broke? You know, so it's like the horror. So it's its own internal horror. But anyway, if you've never seen that episode of Twilight Zone, what are you doing? Go see it. But anyway, so that was something I saw when I was a kid. It informed me. It really, 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 really resonated with me. And then, growing up in the early 80s, I mean, I was inundated on HBO with, the Road Warrior and Mad Max and things like that. And so when I wanted to pick something, because to me, and that's so interesting that you were expecting something that was a movie that was formative for me, because I know that like that big inciting thing for me is that episode, and that there's just like a grouping of movies that I really enjoy. I'm not going to lie. I did a Google search. I was like, well, what are like the top 20, top 30 apocalypse movies? And I was just going to use those as inspiration for like, well, what's the thing that I would really most like to do? And I'll tell you, it wasn't this one. Things get more and more strange. I would say honestly, and I would really like to cover it. I mean, the Mad Max series is fantastic, but to me, I feel like the ultimate like bleak apocalyptic tale has got to be The Road.
Sure.
But to me, I read The Road before I saw the movie, of course. And I would love to cover it on the podcast. I really, really would. And I think that we should. But I really want to reread it. And we just didn't have enough time to read the book and also be able to watch the movie and blah, blah, blah. And I would like to devote some time in the future to that, because that book is bleak and horrible.
Oh my God, yes.
And so is that movie. And actually the movie to me, and just as a sidebar, is very bleak and horrible. But if you've never read the book is probably about 10 times what there are some scenes that they just don't really dig into as much in the movie. That because, that's all. Anyway, so I was like, all right, well, The Road, I don't think I could do it justice, because I would really want to reread the book and do some comparisons, etc. So I went through, and I didn't want to go the Road Warrior route, because everybody's so, we just saw Furiosa, and I think it's in everyone's mind right now. So I think a lot of people are doing dives into the Road Warrior, mythology, etc., because of the Furiosa movie. And I just didn't want to go down that road, because I felt like we'd be like, tagging along. And I saw this on the list, and I was like, you know what? This is a fantastic fucking movie. And I forgot how great it was. And part of wanting to cover it is also wanting to revisit it, because I haven't watched it in a long time, but I do love this movie, love this director, love this actor. I adore Clive Owen. And so I was like, this is it. This is the one I really, really want to do. So that's how I got here. It's sort of a roundabout way to get to this movie, but I wanted to make sure for full disclosure, this is how I got here. This is how I got to Children of Men. But it's such an incredible movie. I saw it in the theater when it came out, and just when it was over, I just sat there and was like, what did I just watch?
Oh my God, I gotta go home and take a shower.
Crazy too. And before we get into details, because we've got so much, the crazy thing to me when I revisited was, I knew I was gonna, rewatch the movie, this night of the week and make notes, and then try and watch it again and make more notes, blah, blah, blah. And when I did that, I carved off like 2.5 hours of my time just to be sure. This movie is 90 minutes long.
I know, this movie zips through.
It zips, and I had totally forgotten that. So I just did not have any sense memory of that. So, and it's rare to have a movie that's as dense as this dramatically in the movie theater and have it be less than 2 hours long, like less than an hour 45. The fact that this is clocked in at like, I think it's 93 minutes is incredible. So anyway, I'm glad I chose it. It really sort of sparked our listeners. I can't wait to get to our feedback. There were some really interesting things that came up during that, and I'm so glad that I revisited something that I think has sort of fallen off the radar a little. I don't think you hear it discussed, but I think we're going to have some stuff to sort of tie to current situations that will be very interesting. So we would normally discuss our quick thoughts. I really feel like I already sort of gave my thoughts. I adore this movie. I think it's great. So what about you? How do you feel about Children of Men?
Well, you're right. It's an amazing movie. And the director, Alphonse Cuarón, however you pronounce his name with the little accent, symbol there. His style of filmmaking in this is, this movie almost looks like a documentary.
Right.
With the extremely long takes and if not a documentary, then it looks like a segment you'd see on the news, where the camera, like there are scenes where Clive Owen will be right in the foreground, then he'll walk away and then the camera literally will run after him. And it's not like a Panaglide, right? It's not nice and smooth. It's jerky. And you can tell the camera person is moving because the camera's bouncing. And then, there are the 3 or 4 just unbelievable set piece sequences that, they look like they're one long continuous shot, but they're actually, there's a little bit of trickery going on and some digital effects being done to kind of, mask, where cuts are. But when you watch them, you really can't tell. And there are unbelievable scenes, right? Where, you're like, oh my God, and if you read about it, some of the scenes that they wanted to shoot that are, maybe like 5-6 minutes or 7-8 minutes in the movie would take like 5 or 6 hours to shoot. And then if they wanted to reshoot it, that's like another 5 or 6 hours that they have to put together, and so on. And so the look of this movie is unbelievable and fantastic. And so I was not familiar with the book when I saw it. I had not read the book first, and the book came out, I want to say like in the 90s, in the early 90s.
I have not read the book. In this case, I have not.
Okay. So. So I went into this really knowing nothing about what it was about, other than just the basic setup of, it's sort of the downfall of society. The people aren't women are just for whatever reason can't get pregnant anymore, and we're pretty much kind of going down the road to the end. No pun intended with the road, but and so I after that I knew nothing, and I was just kind of swept up into this story, much like Clive Owen is, and literally the world is just blowing up around it. So I was blown away by this movie, and I think my reaction coming out of the theater was similar, if not identical, to yours, where you're almost numb at the end, where you're like, oh my God, and certainly a movie that evokes a lot of thought after the fact. Yeah. Where you look back and think about everything you've seen and all the concepts you've introduced. So yeah, I am a huge fan of this movie. The only quibble I would have at all is that is this really an apocalyptic film, or is this more of like a dystopian dark future type of film? And don't get me wrong, it's not great, but it's not like The Road Warrior, right, where society or The Walking Dead or any of those kind of things where society is gone and there is no government, there is no, the lights don't work, and unless we're talking about fear, in which case then everything does. But you know what I mean? Yeah. It's much more of yeah.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, and I totally get where you're coming from. I think what's interesting is I personally, I still sort of I can see both sides. I absolutely can. But we also know through the tales that things are still sort of hanging by a thread in England, and they are the only society that's still in place. Everything else has fallen. Right. And I think a lot of that has to do with them being an island too. Like whatever has befallen other areas is probably because, if no pun intended, but if shit's falling apart in, the US, Canada is screwed, and so is Mexico. Same thing with like if things fall apart in like Italy, then France and Germany and whatever, because you can just travel across the land and get to them. Whereas, in England, they're all sort of they're sort of, I guess, buffered from that. You'd have to swim a really long distance to like get to them. So I see your point. They are not in an apocalyptic environment per se, if you want to go by the definition. But I think they are teetering on the edge of it, and since they are surrounded by all other countries have all fallen apart, it's almost like, I don't know, like the threat of apocalypse is all around them at all times.
Oh yeah.
They're all just sort of like I said, hanging by a thread. But
yeah,
I see your point. I see your point that if you wanted to go by sort of like traditional, it does sort of fall more under dystopian. But so many apocalyptic stories use dystopian as their genre as well, that it all sort of, I'd say the Venn diagram of apocalypse tales and dystopian futuristic tales has a lot of overlap. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean absolutely. But to me, like, this falls more into the category of like Blade Runner. Where it's, again, Blade Runner, it's obviously very bleak and, not, it doesn't look like it's a swell place to live. Right. But there still is at least some semblance of normality, and like society, right? It's very, very stretched and thin and so on. And I think you can apply that same kind of stuff here, and that, Clive Owen, he's got a job, right? He obviously they throw him money for the bus, so there's still currency going around. You can go get a cup of coffee. You just better not stick around in the coffee shop too long, because it's going to blow up. But I mean, a lot of things that we do now, they can still do. But again, like you said, kind of are all around that. You can see the end is coming, right?
Yeah,
and
it's imminent.
It's sort of, and the whole idea of, that it's been almost 20 years since the last birth of a human, is just accentuating the point that, they're on the way out, they're not coming back. So, but again, it's semantics, because it's a great movie and it's a really cool choice. And I'm really looking forward to jumping into it.
Exciting. All right. So first off, let's discuss the movie description itself. Do you want to take care of that? Or you want me to do it?
Oh, you go right ahead. This is your film.
Okay. This is my party. So there's a lot of descriptions out there, and I just went for one that I thought was the simplest. So basically, Children of Men, which was released in 2006. Here is the description of the plot, which is: in 2027, not that far from now.
Only 3 years from now. Get ready.
In 2027, in a chaotic world in which women have somehow become infertile, a former activist agrees to help transport a miraculously pregnant woman to a sanctuary at sea. And there it is.
There you go. All you need to know, people.
So all you need to know. And we talked a little bit already about the director, who's Alfonso Cuarón, who has a list as long as my arm of things he's done.
Oh, yeah.
But his style, you can see it. This was early in his career, and you can just... He does do like dark and moody very, very well. It's kind of his wheelhouse.
I think people they might not know this, but the movie that he has done that most people would have seen is he did one of the Harry Potter movies. He did The Prisoner of Azkaban,
which a lot of people would say is probably one of the darkest ones.
Oh, it is.
Because the first one and the second one are so You know, they've got like there's some dark parts there, but it's still very like a children's movie. The third movie is when it stopped being a children's movie.
Right. It's where
it was a movie about children, but it was so dark. That's actually, it's probably my favorite one out of all the movies.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, and I think a lot of people obviously have seen that movie, but they might not, you know, the name of the director might not be right in the, you know, forefront of their mind. But yeah, Absolutely. He did that. He did that one. Yeah. So, but then the script on this, you know, there's like 5 people that are credited with writing this script because it was rewritten like multiple times. Because what I read about it was Cuarón wanted to do it, but then he signed up to do Azkaban first. And so while he was directing Azkaban, the script went through multiple rewrites. And so you have all these people that are attached to it at the end. In the end credits, they have him, Alfonso Cuarón. They have Timothy J. Sexton, David Arata, Mark Fergus, and Hawk Ostby. Yes, that's right, the great Hawk Ostby.
I'm familiar with his work. No.
Okay. And you're like, I am not. Yeah,
I am not.
But anyway, so it did go through multiple drafts, and another thing that came out in the interviews of the time, and I think I saw this on the DVD when I rented it at one point, is that Clive Owen is actually a major contributor to the script, but it went all uncredited, where he's not listed, but he and the director worked on the script a lot to kind of put it in its final shape, which I think is really interesting that Clive Owen, you know, felt strongly enough about this project that he wanted to kind of go in there and tweak it and do whatever needed to be done to be right. And then again, you know, all the other guys kind of contributed in whatever the drafts were, and then probably, you know, what you're seeing on the screen is mostly, you know, Alfonso Cuarón and Clive Owen's work, with, you know, whatever the other guys did has been altered and changed multiple times, which is always what happens when you have, you know, multiple drafts of a story. But yeah. And I want to say the guy who wrote the novel,
it's actually a woman.
Oh, is it a woman? Okay.
Yeah. James. Yeah. Or something.
Yeah. It's let's see. No, wait. Yeah, P.D. James, correct. Yeah, and anyway, when I see, again, all I had was the initials, so I unfortunately,
same. It was.
I'm
a
boy,
only
and I went
in
to
something.
Boys.
Yeah, I know. Well, most people that refer to themselves by initials like that tend stereotypically to be male, and I just assumed. And then I read an article where they were talking about her approving of the movie. Or approving of what they did with the movie. And when they said her, I was like, oh. And I guess I have no idea, but Phyllis or, Patricia or something like that.
I'm looking. It's Phyllis Dorothy James White was her name.
Look at that.
And I was just going to say that when the movie came out, even though it does differ a little from the novel, was very enthusiastic and definitely was saying, yeah, that's an incredible vision of my story. So
I think to me, the only thing I saw, because I did read some articles where they talked about some differences between the book and here, and there are some that are quite important, but there's one that I thought is interesting. So the book's written by a woman. And in her version, the infertility event,
it's the boys.
It was the boys.
Yeah.
So the men write this script, and they don't pick a gender, but it's basically women can't get pregnant.
Yeah.
They don't say it right out, but it feels like it's geared more towards women.
It's very ambiguous, but yeah, the idea is that and Cuarón basically said that he didn't want to do what he called like expository filmmaking. He's like, I'm not a fan of that. And he because of course he's European, and he feels that movies are way too held prisoner now, or back then, when he was making it, he said they're held prisoner to the narrative, that the narrative is kind of taking over, and that's the most important thing, is telling this complete story. And he didn't like that. He likes things to be kind of open-ended and not throw everything on a silver platter for the audience and make them have to think about stuff. So he purposefully removed the cause of the infertility, very similar to what we see in the zombie universe, in that in almost every zombie story is never explained exactly why or how the dead are coming back to life.
Because to me, like, that, it doesn't matter. Like how the infertility happened is immaterial. It's mood. It doesn't matter to me, because you'd have to think, because society fell apart, that it's something viral. Or something, you know what I mean? Because
pollution, radiation.
Yeah.
You know, enough mercury in the fish, something, right? That. Yeah. But again, the why, it doesn't matter. It's this is just what's going on. But you're right. And if you watch the film, the subtle clues we get about it highly suggest it's the women just can't conceive it. And really the biggest clue we get is when Miriam is talking to Theo, and Miriam was like the midwife, and she's talking about how it went back, when it started, 18, 20 years ago, she got there were 3 miscarriages in a week from the hospital she worked at. And then she talked to a friend of hers at another hospital, and they had the same thing, and they called another friend and they had the same thing. And then, and it started out, and it was like women were miscarrying 6 or 7 months into the pregnancies. And then it started happening much sooner in the pregnancy. So they weren't pregnant for very long. And then women just stopped getting pregnant. And so again, it's real subtle, but that's really the idea that, it's something has happened to prevent women from becoming pregnant. But again, I laugh now knowing that the author is it was a woman, and she blamed it on the dudes, and they're shooting blanks, and now the guys that are making the movie are like, well, we're not going to have that happen,
Can't have that happening here. No.
how can we support the patriarchy? Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's before we fall apart, discussing things here and there, let's jump right in.
Okay.
And I think it's interesting because Cuarón doesn't like the expository form of filmmaking, but he does dip into just a tiny bit of it, and that's with the opening. So in the opening, the credits are coming up, a little bit at a time. And as they are, there's audio in the background. So you don't get any images, which I think is fair, because you don't want to, you hear these things and then you get an image in your head of, riots and things in the street and things are falling apart. But then you are presented with London, and it's like you were saying, it's okay. There's obviously been some conflict here and there. You can see the streets are a little bit falling apart, but he's literally going to get a cup of coffee. Right. So you've got these different news reports in the background, and that's when you find out things like, things have fallen apart in other countries, and that England is the only real government that's pretty much still standing. They're sort of on one leg, and their toes are broken, but they're still standing. Yeah. And so this great opening with these, and it's very simple. It's just black with white, writing for the credits in the beginning, and it's just very simple, and there's no other imagery, and it's just this audio of all of these different news reports coming in. And then when it does open up and it shows Theo going to get his coffee, and as he's going to get his coffee, then we do get a visual news report, which was obviously the baby Diego story.
Right.
And then so you go from darkness with the news, and then Theo going to get the coffee, and then the baby Diego story, and he leaves the coffee shop, and then bam, We're 5 minutes into the movie, less actually, I think, if I clocked it, and the coffee shop explodes.
Yes.
And that's your sort of inciting incident to the whole movie.
It basically grabs you by the lapels and throws you into this world. And the way that it's set up, like I said, it looks like it's one long shot, but again, there's articles about how they made this movie if you're really curious after you see it, because it looks phenomenal, but it's not. I hate to burst the bubble. There were a couple takes, but it's such a seamless route. You're just, I mean, when you watch it, you're like, oh my God, because literally the camera is like from behind the counter of the coffee shop, and you have this crowd of people that are watching the Diego story on the television, and you're right. It looks very normal, and the crowd of people, it's lots of different, ethnicities and race. You know what I mean? It's just like a normal group. It's not like a whole bunch of white people or whatever, And Clive Owen comes in and kind of works his way through and asks for a cup of coffee. He gets it, turns around and leaves. The camera literally follows him out of the store, the shop, and he goes down a little ways to one of those newspaper boxes, where you'd put the coin in and then you'd open up and take a newspaper. And I think he gets out his bottle of liquor, and he's gonna Irish up his coffee for the morning. Good way to start the day.
Hey, I resemble that remark.
Yes,
How
you do.
dare you.
But only on weekends for you.
Yes, just pocket whiskey.
Exactly, and literally
whiskey.
Yeah, right. It's not drinking, it's surviving. And as he's doing that, and again, the camera kind of goes past him and spins around. And so we are looking at him, and behind him now is where the coffee shop is. And it just, like you said, it just blows up, and people are right there, and they get blown into the street, and people are crying and screaming. I mean, you're like, holy crap, and then you're into it and you're going, and it's an unbelievable way to start a movie.
It really is. And like you said, I like that imagery. It really does. It grabs you by the lapels. And he's in his suit to go to work too. So it's almost like he is he's shaken out of it. And the thing is that, come to find out that Theo is living this sort of drudgery life anyway.
Oh yeah.
He's, he lost his family. He's by himself. The only time he has any kind of life that differentiates from the ordinary is when he goes to visit his friend Jasper. So so you get the sense of this sort of day-to-day drudgery, and he's barely paying attention, and he leaves the coffee shop, and it's like, no man, the world is gonna come, and it shakes him, and geez. But here's the other thing that's interesting about that explosion. He literally just it affects him, and it's scary, just walks away.
Yeah, he just keeps going to work.
So think how common is it for that to happen?
Right.
That it's just okay, well, that happened again. Well, I got to get to work.
Yeah.
So that's shocking to me, to think that they're dealing with something like that on such a regular basis, that they're just okay, well, damn, did I get any, check my suit. Did I get any plaster or dust? No.
Yeah.
Brush myself off, grab my Irish coffee, and off I go to work.
Yeah,
to
right.
Sort of make it through the day. Yeah.
I mean, because he's got to make it to the train. He doesn't have time to sit there.
Yeah.
The train's coming, and he's got to be on the platform. So yeah,
gotta be. You and I both wrote down the graffiti, the first piece of graffiti that really jumps out, and it's fantastic. It's just because the world is so bleak. There's nobody being born. So clearly we're at that point. It's an extinction point. Without any more babies, everyone's going to die. And it's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
And obviously, the whole baby Diego thing, the thing that everybody was so excited about was he was the youngest person in the world.
Yes.
And he was 18 and however many days and whatever months.
Yeah.
And they were just sort of grasping onto that as their last little bit of hope. Because, once everybody gets beyond childbirthing years,
then you're done.
It's over. It's really over.
That's right.
So we're in the midst of this sort of extinction event, and as he's, making his way to work, there's this piece of graffiti on the wall that just awesome. Last one to die, turn out the lights.
Yeah.
And
Last one to die, turn out the yeah.
What a great line.
It's right up there with the 28 Days Later when Jim goes into the church at the beginning when he's roaming around London by himself, but he doesn't know what's going on. And as he's going up the stairs, he sees someone has written on the wall, "The end is extremely forking nigh." And, you know what I mean? It is. It's just one of those great little production design bits that just helps sell the story. But I would just point out the graffiti in general in this movie. I mean, every alley, every building has either, the fishes have some kind of message or the human, whatever that thing is called, the
Human Project.
The Human Project, there's all over. It says the Human Project is real. That's plastered over. I mean, the production design in this movie is just unbelievable. And like you said, it looks like London. It looks normal, but it's run down and fallen apart, and it just has graffiti on top of graffiti on top of graffiti. I mean, it's just an incredible, bleak kind of gray look to it that is just and it just helps set the mood. And then, like you said, Theo is trudging off to work, and you really get the idea that when he's in London, he's alive, but he's not living. Right.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
And he even later on when he's talking to Jasper in the car, and Jasper's asking hey, are you still seeing that girl or something? And he's just like, oh no, that was a long time ago. You know what I mean? So you get the idea that, it's like just there, he has nothing. He goes to his apartment, gets up in the morning, goes to work, then comes home, goes to his apartment. I mean, that's it. And that's kind of where, we as a species and as a society are at in this movie. And it's bleak as crap. And just the accentuation or the cherry on the top is just, like you said, there's this horrific bombing that happens, and he's literally 20 feet away. And his reaction is, like you said, he makes sure, oh, wait, I'm fine. I'm not wounded. I'm going to work. And you're just like, oh my God, how often does this happen that's the reaction? And it's not just him, it's everyone.
Yeah. The only thing that makes it a day that stands out, actually, he gets into the office and everybody is crying over the Baby Diego news. They're so upset. And I love how he uses it.
Oh, he does.
And he goes right into his boss's office and says, "The loss of Baby Diego hit me harder than I expected. Can I work from home today?"
Yep.
And it's funny because if you think about it, there weren't a lot of people who did have the work from home option back in 2006. So it probably felt very foreign. But these days, it's so easy to, depending on the job you have, like your job and my job, we really can't do a lot of work from home, but a lot of folks can. Sure. And that happened during the pandemic. So it's it's just interesting to see in a society where during a time period where that just wasn't a common thing, that it was okay. The guy was like, sure, whatever, get out of here, pretty much.
Well, and the other interesting thing, I don't know if you picked up on this, but when he walks through the office, almost everyone else that is sitting in his little cubicle farm area, all women. All women, and except his boss, who's in an office, that's a man. But and you're right, and all these women, you see their cubes or their desk, and they got all this personal stuff and little knickknacks and stuff, and you just know that his area has absolutely nothing.
Yeah,
right.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just
without question.
And you also can tell that he hates his job. And, he has, there's the only reason he shows up at all is to get paid. That's it. Right. There's no, this is my dream I always wanted to do whatever this is, and but I did think that was interesting that all of these coworkers, they're just sobbing. And his reaction to that guy was a wanker, about Baby Diego. Right. And we should point out that in the news report, Baby Diego was killed because someone asked him for an autograph, and he spit in that person's face. And that person then killed them in a fight, like a brawl broke out.
And he was stabbed or something.
Yeah, right. You know what I mean? And so again, it's not like he was doing like humanitarian acts somewhere and got killed. You know what I mean? It's like, no, he like picked a fight with someone and they killed him because he was being a douchebag. And that's what, because Jasper's talking to him about it, because the next scene after he asks his boss off, he's in the car with Jasper, played amazingly by Michael Caine, I should point out. And Jasper's kind of asking him, and he's like, that guy was a wanker. It's just so funny.
And I think too, like, I think that really taps into, and this was way before, like YouTube and TikTok celebrities and stuff like that. I mean, don't get me wrong, there was still like social media. They weren't quite called influencers just yet.
No.
But there were still people that were living their lives. But when I think back then, I think Kardashians, the early days of like being famous for no reason. So
just being famous.
Yeah. And Diego's the same way. He was famous for being famous.
Right.
And so here's this moment of celebrity, and it really, bit him in the ass because he was acting like an ass.
Right.
I just think it's great. It's great. It's just, there's so many little mini nuanced, like, takes on like modern society and the things that we hold up as important. It's so funny to me. I'm sure I cannot even tell you like how many times I open up the news, and this isn't a judgment or anything, but sometimes it's generational too, and things like that. But every now and then there'll be a news story that's like, and they'll say the person's name, and they were, popular TikToker, popular, it's more TikTok than anything these days, popular TikToker, cause of death revealed for blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, who is this person? I don't even know who they are.
Right.
And I wouldn't go so far as to be like Theo and be like, oh, they're a wanker. But they're just like, there's a whole segment of the world that responds, like with the Baby Diego thing, to people like that who are online. And it's just, that, this person, whoever they were, when they passed away, that there were people who had never met them that cried for them, just like this. I like those little mini social commentary things that happened throughout this, and some of it unintentional. You know what I mean? Like, did he see the start of something like that, like the love of the cult of celebrity? It's really interesting. I love it. Love all of it.
Yeah.
And I love Michael Caine. I love that he did this role, and it's a small role, but he's just so good in it. He really, really is.
Yeah, well, that was my comment, was like, oh yeah, this is one of those good Michael Caine movies, because Michael Caine, like, he never met a check he wouldn't, take, right? I mean,
and he's been very honest about that.
Oh yeah.
I love his comment when someone was like, someone was giving him shit about Jaws 3, and they were like,
Jaws 4, but yeah.
Yeah, but Jaws 4. I'm sorry. And
Jaws
they were
3
like,
is the one in 3D with Dennis Quaid.
Oh, right. Paycheck for Dennis Quaid in part 3. Paycheck for Michael Caine in part 4.
Yes.
And they asked him like, oh, it's so terrible. Haven't you ever seen the movie? And he says, no, but I see my mom's house that I was able to buy because I did that movie.
Yeah.
And it's like that perspective. And Michael Caine's done plenty of, movies that have like depth and meaning, but he understands more than anybody, this is a job. And sometimes you have to do a job that, is it great? No, but I'm going to give it my all. And I'm going to, be paid for it. Paid for my time, and I'm giving you my time.
Right.
But this was, no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, do you remember when we saw Malcolm McDowell talk in his panel, and someone asked him like how you choose your roles? And literally one of the things he said was, well, it depends on where is it going to be shot, because if it's I'll go someplace warm. If it's going to be shot in Hawaii, I'm real interested in doing that movie. It's like all these real world things that you're like, oh yeah, I guess that's right. And so on. But I had heard that Michael Caine story. Where I think he got paid like $1 million for Jaws 4. And he used the money to like buy his mom a house, and then years later, some fan was like, "Oh my God, the movie's terrible," and he's like, "Yeah, but you should see my mom's house. It's awesome."
It's great. And I don't have to worry about that. The movie sure was terrible,
Right.
But
right.
and you know, and we've heard actors say many times, you know, the script was great, but like maybe it was edited badly, or maybe they made poor directing choices or stuff like that.
Or
like
they ran out of money or whatever. Yeah.
And he can't. You have no control over any of those things. Any of those things.
But let's be honest. Like, you have to know that a lot of these, you know, people, they take a script, they'll take a job, and they're like, oh wow, this is terrible. But you know what? They're gonna pay me, you know, $50,000 for a week, so I'll do it. You know what I mean? Because that's how you do that. So
you have to make those choices.
But like you said, this is not one of those times. No. This is like an actual good project, and you can tell that Michael Caine is engaged and you know, really he's into it and really giving an amazing performance as this kind of hippie, like, political cartoonist who is, like, talk about off the grid, right? You know, he literally, like, his driveway is literally covered in like brush that you have to clear off the road before you can turn in. That's how much he is, you know, off of the main, you know, road and connected with everyone else. But he's a wonderful character, and it's like you almost want more, but then I think it's just the right amount.
I completely agree, and I think too, like, even though, you know, Cuarón says the not wanting to be into exposition, there's a tiny bit of it while, you know, Theo is at his house the first time, and it's all you need. And it's just some pictures and some articles on the wall so that you can place who they are. Jasper is an award-winning political cartoonist, and his wife was an award-winning photojournalist.
Yes.
And she was tortured by the government.
Right. Well, allegedly. The headline is that they deny it, but she's like a vegetable.
Yeah. Yeah. She's in a she's just like sitting there in her chair. I mean, she's upright.
Yeah.
And she's in her chair, but she's just not there. Like, mentally, she is just not there.
Yeah.
But because of that, you come to find out the government really sort of understands that they're at an extinction point. So they've started, you think it was weird getting COVID tests at home. They offer this sort of, you know, I'm using air quotes here, a way out called Quietus. And it's basically a suicide sort of
home
suicide kit. And he, you know, the government gives them out. Basically, they're saying for you to be able to choose. It's going to happen anyway, and the world is kind of falling apart. But we would like to say, go ahead.
Whatever. Wait, if that's what you want to do, it's cool.
A little bit.
It's
too, because it's, you wonder because I don't know. I just, for someone like him who's older, and even if they can discover the fertility issue, it's not like Jasper's going to be able to contribute to that. Jasper can, maybe, but his wife can't, probably not. Yeah. And so, you know, you wonder, like, are they just deciding, like, well, we can now, if these people off themselves, we don't have to worry about doing it, and we can direct our resources towards the younger people and maybe more of our studies and trying really, really hard to, like, you know, like, we're using our country's resources on these people who, you know, they're not going to be able to contribute anything when anything comes back. So,
well, and you know, resources are dwindling. So, you know, if there's a way we can kind of thin the herd, let's do it. Yeah, I mean, it's a very
they found ways to thin the herd, because you made a point there. They drive past the fields.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, that I thought that was a really, really cool moment. When before they get to his house, they're just driving through the countryside, and they're literally on these farms and on you know, burning, and these off to the side of the road are these big piles of cows, which, you know, if you remember the mad cow scare that ran through England, you know, maybe about that time, 10, 15 years ago, where, you know, this mad cow, you know, what was it, like a mad cow disease or mouth and hoof disease, whatever it was, where if you eat the meat and back the way that the big meat processing places work, they throw in a lot of the other organs of the animals and just kind of mix them all together. So you get the brain and the kidneys and all stuff. Well, if you eat this infected mad cow disease, it can be transmitted to humans. And there was this huge scare. And so they were wiping out huge lots of their herds of their cows to try and eradicate it. And, there was a big thing in the U.S., like, could it get to the United States? And, how can we protect ourselves? It was a huge deal. Again, this is, 15 years before COVID, 10 years before COVID was a thing. So this was like, oh, my God, how can I get a hamburger if it's all mad cow, but I love that little kind of nod to it, that it kind of adds to like you said, we're on the road to the end of everything. And here's the thing where one of our food supplies, probably we screwed it up and poisoned it. And now all the cows have this thing, and there's no more meat. Sorry.
Yeah, it definitely is it's a harbinger for bad things.
Yes.
Because when the society is falling apart and your resources are small for food, you don't go killing the cows unless you need to.
Unless you have no choice, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it makes you wonder about that. Like there's and like we said, in terms of no exposition, the cows are never explained. No. They're just there, and you're meant to sort of like jump to those conclusions. Even if you didn't jump to the are they diseased conclusions, it's just a really creepy thing for him to be driving along a country road and there's these piles with hooves in the air and they're all black and they're just
charred. Yeah, you're just like, oh my God.
It messes with your mind a bunch.
Yeah. And then
but I go ahead. Okay.
I was just gonna say, like, when they're in the car and they're talking about Diego, baby Diego, and and of course, Theo's like, he was a wanker, and I can't believe people are crying over him, and then he talks a little bit about the explosion and how it almost got him, and Jasper has this great line where Jasper is definitely has he is like the most hopeful character in this movie in terms of his outlook. He's always happy and cracking jokes and
total hippie.
Yeah. And again, he's probably high the entire movie, right? But still, he is, out of everybody in this movie, he is clearly the one that is the most just kind of laid back and like, it's not that bad, but he cracks this joke of like, he says something like, I'm glad you don't take cream and sugar, amigo. Basically saying if you'd spent like another second in that coffee shop, you would have been blowed up. So, it's unbelievable. And just getting back to the quietus, I believe the slogan on the box of the suicide kit says quietus in big letters, and then below it says when you know it's time or something like that. I'm just like, really?
Oh my God. That's awesome.
And of course, later on, we find out that the reason why Jasper has it is he uses the whatever is in there, whether it's a pill or it's a shot or whatever, and he says he puts it in bread to kill the rats.
Oh yeah.
So that's why he has a couple of them. But yeah, it's again, state-sponsored suicide, never a good sign in your society, in your future movie.
Yeah, it's never a sign that things are, going well, as it were.
Yes.
Overall, the whole section where he's at Jasper's is just really great. There's very light exposition. You get more of a sense of who Theo is and how he's sort of been in this world. They show a little flash of the little picture that Jasper has of Theo, Julian, and their son. And so you have an idea, like you haven't met her yet, but you realize like he doesn't have these things in his life. So obviously there's a loss there that we don't know about yet. And, and just, it seems like he has such a close relationship with them, and they never explain where it was that they sort of met, one would assume college or something like that. Like maybe he was a professor or something.
Or maybe activism.
Yeah. Maybe that too.
And there was find that out that Julian and he were activists in the before time.
Yeah, but there's such a love there. There's so much tenderness, and even like there's a moment where they're putting a scarf on Janice, the wife, and Theo's right there, and he's sort of helping, and like, oh, she likes red, and like it's a really tender moment. You see that there's a lot of history with them, and it's just a really, really lovely scene, and like you said, Michael Caine killing it as always, you know.
Well, and here's where we get our first introduction to the Human Project as well, because Michael Caine starts telling that joke about the Human Project, and at first Theo doesn't know that it's a joke, and he's just like, that's just a bunch of bullshit, you know, and he's
like, let me finish my joke.
Yeah, but you get that right away. You get the sense that Theo does not thinks that it's completely made up, that it's not a real thing at all, that it's just sort of this illusion that people have created because they need hope, and the idea, the concept of the Human Project is that somewhere out there are these scientists that are got their little like safe haven somewhere, secret, nobody knows where it is, and they're working on a cure, right? They're gonna solve the fertility thing and pull us, you know, out of this nosedive. And again, could it be real? That's a real question in this movie. Is that real at the end? You don't really know. No. There's it's totally open to how you interpret it. But yeah, then Michael Caine goes, I was just trying to tell a joke. And he's like, I'm sorry, go ahead, tell your joke. And the joke is awesome. If you remember, where he said the Human Project has this, they're having this banquet where they get all these people together to discuss the problem of infertility, and they're kind of going back and forth and giving what they think is going on, and finally they realize there's this one guy in the back who's just eating his dinner like a madman and not saying a word, and they're like, well, let's ask this guy. And so they ask him, do you know what's causing the infertility? And the guy looks up and he's holding a very big wing that he's chewing on, and he goes, I have no idea, but I have to say this stork is delicious.
That's right, the stork.
Right.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Well, and it's just like I could almost see it like as a cartoon that Jasper would have drawn.
Right. Yeah. So he can't do that anymore in society. They probably don't really have newspapers, or he just isn't doing his stuff anymore.
Yeah, there's no more critiques of the government anymore, I'm sure.
Correct. So he can only tell the story. He can't write the story that he normally would, which is sad.
Yeah.
So the next section of the movie is really, it's, Julian goes home, but is then
kidnapped.
He's kidnapped.
Yes.
He's kind of like, he's kidnapped by a bunch of ding dongs, really. But come to find out, it is the Fishes, which is sort of this underground rebel movement, we're led to believe, and it's his ex, Julian, who has
she runs it.
Yeah. And so she's had him taken, and they have a proposition for him, and it's to help get this one girl safely out of, England, pretty much. And what they're looking for is papers. Transit papers, which they need. And he has a cousin that could possibly get them, a cousin who works in that area. And so that's why he's been approached. And, he scoffs at the idea because he hasn't seen Julian in years, and why pick me and all that other stuff. But they also offer him a lot of money. And, once they throw him out of the van and throw him some bus fare, the very next thing you see is him heading to his cousin's very fancy house to ask him about the transit papers.
Yeah.
So clearly he made it seem like, money.
I don't need your money. Yeah, right.
But, smash cut. Hey, cousin, how are you?
Yeah. Well, and also we couple things is that when he's abducted, it's in broad daylight, and there are all kinds of people on the street walking around. None of them
Nobody
blink
cares.
at all.
Nobody
They're just
cares.
like, whatever. Yeah, right. Which again kind of shows you the state we're in this film, in this universe. But I would also point out that in the car you have Chiwetel Ejiofor, who plays Luke, who is an amazing actor. Right.
He's great.
He's so many things he's done that are amazing. Plus a very young Charlie Hunnam, right? As Patrick. So you have two people that were, I think Ejiofor he had already done some stuff. So he was kind of already established. But I think
what's funny is he actually had just before he had done Inside Man, which was with Clive Owen
with
Clive
Owen,
yeah. With Denzel and Jodie Foster, the Spike Lee movie. That is such a fantastic movie.
It's a great movie, yeah.
Yeah.
But Charlie Hunnam, this was like one of his first things. Like he had not gotten Sons of Anarchy yet, so
no, not at all.
Yeah, but anyway, it's just really interesting that it's like, oh my God, this is an incredible cast, you know?
Yeah.
And so they do. They scoop him up, and I love when they take him into this room, and it's like the walls and the windows are covered in newsprint, which is great because you should freeze frame and read the headlines because they're insane, crazy terrorist attack kind of headlines about how crappy the world's becoming, or at least England's becoming. But Julian's in there, and so she starts talking to him, and they take the hood off, they untie him, and then they turn on. They have this bright light in his face, and then they turn that off, so it's kind of like normal lighting. And his comment to her is like, on the news, they use a photograph of you that's really old and it doesn't do you justice. And her response back is like, since when do the police know anything about justice? Which I love that line. It's so great. It's so double meaning and true, that it's like, they don't care, So anyway, I thought that was really fun. And the reason why, because he asked her, why are you coming to me to get these transit papers? You could get them a million different ways. And I think it's really interesting that her line is, because I can trust you.
Yeah.
And again, as we see, as events unfold, does that suggest that maybe she was a little untrustworthy of some of her coworkers?
I think so. Like we don't know that at the time.
Yeah.
But we come to find out later. I think she knew that when it all came down to it, he may be in it for the money, and that's his motivating factor probably right now. But she also knows that he would never double cross her.
Right.
And she's not so certain about the rest of them. And she was ultimately right.
And just, I think you're right. It's confirmed when Key, which is the girl that he's going to end up escorting, when she is in the barn and she basically says, Julian told me that, I can trust you, that you're the only one I can trust, is what she says. I think something like that, right? That just kind of, to me, that those two lines, because you're right, when she says that I can trust you line, there's no reason to think anything is weird with her and her folks. But then as events unfold, and then you hear this other line, it's like clearly she was fearful about what could happen, because she'd already kind of set these things up with Key saying, look, if anything bad happens to me and you're worried, that guy over there, that, the drunk that you call him in the car, that's the guy that you can trust. Don't trust anybody else. And it's just a real interesting turn of events. But yeah, so they kick him out, and then the next scene he's going to another great actor, to Danny Hudson, who is he's like a minister of art or something in this film, and his whole job is to go and try and secure as many works of art that in the world that are still around, and get them to England. Right.
What a crazy job to have.
Oh, yeah.
At the end of the world.
And Clive Owen, he's kind of laughs at him, because he's like, why do you do this? Because you know that in 100 years, no one's going to be around to see any of this crap, and Danny Hudson, he kind of just looks at him and goes, I just don't think about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, and here's where you see the Pink Floyd pig outside. It's like this inflatable which is from a cover from a Pink Floyd album, I believe it's from Animals, and a very famous cover of this pig floating above this factory, which is the exact same location where they shot that sequence. But yeah, he goes and he asks this guy for some transit letters, and he gives him this story about he met a girl and like her brother's sick and she needs to go see him and he's not going to live long. Can you help? And whatever he tells him, it works because he apparently gets the papers without having to provide any more information. So he has the papers and he makes contact with the fishes again. They gave him a way to do that with a missing dog flyer. And then we get this great scene where it's Julianne and Luke. Luke's driving. Julianne's in the passenger seat, in the front seat. And then in the back seat, we have Theo. We have this young girl, Key, who is a Fuji. And then we meet Miriam, who is, we don't know it at the time, but she's a midwife. Right. And they're driving in like the middle of nowhere in this country road, right? That's like the car barely fits on the road. That's, you know what I mean? It's like, I don't even know if it was paved. It was, right. They're just in the middle of nowhere and they're driving along and we get to this just amazing sequence. And I know you have some notes in there about it, so I'll let you go.
Oh, about where they were?
Yeah, about the scene, just about the scene and what happens.
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, there's a couple of different scenes. There's the one where we're talking about the first when they're driving in. This is before they even get to the farm.
Yeah, they're driving.
So they're driving down the road,
and then the burning car comes rolling down. And all
oh
that
God,
stuff.
yeah. And it's interesting because the whole sequence, once it becomes clear that they are under attack, which is basically what's happening, the whole sequence is them driving backwards.
Yes.
Which is so cool. It's super cool. Yeah. And there's people that have run out of the woods. Like so the whole image is just this burning car that comes into their path.
And it completely blocks the way. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Blocks their path and they can't go anywhere. So they're all of a sudden, Luke, who is the other guy from the fishes, whatever, he's driving and he all of a sudden they're like, back up. So he starts driving backwards. So he starts driving backwards, very effectively, by the way. But all of these guys, all of these people come out of the woods and they are surrounding the car and they're trying to get into the car. And it's got a very zombie apocalypse feel for a little bit. It's like being surrounded by the zombies. And there's a couple of moments where they're trying to fight them off. Theo has a moment where he opens the door and gets there's a motorcycle that comes up on them and he gets the door and he knocks into them and knocks them off the bike. And, there's all these other different moments, but right in the middle of it, someone comes out and they've got a gun and they shoot Julian and they get her it looks like they got her right in the neck.
Yeah.
In the throat.
It's the guys on the motorcycle.
Yeah.
That do it. Yeah.
And they're just so the rest of the time that they're driving backwards, Luke's trying his best to drive backwards. Windows are breaking from gunshots, and Theo has his hands up around her neck trying to stop the bleeding. And she's got this look on her face because she knows I've been shot. There's blood everywhere. He's holding her neck. They're driving backwards. There's all this chaos going on. It is an incredible scene, an absolutely incredible scene. And it's crazy because the last real action-y scene that we had was this explosion. And then the next sort of action set piece scene involves an explosion as well. And that's the inciting incident that, gets everything into motion, because if that burning car had, just come down the mountain and gone right off the road, it wouldn't have worked and they would have been able to just speed right out of there. But they timed it and did it and it was just perfect. Yeah. And it was just it's a super, super cool scene. It's really executed very, very well. And you are on the edge of your seat the whole scene.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's amazing. Yeah. I mean, like at one point, someone throws a Molotov cocktail and it hits the front of the car. So now the front of the car is on fire. And then the motorcycle comes up and it's someone is driving the motorcycle and there's someone sitting behind them. And that person just very calmly points a pistol at them and fires. And then it's just a wonderful piece of sound design because you hear the bullet go through the windshield and hit Julian, and then you kind of get that sort of muted, like my eardrums just got blown sound, and there's blood spatter, and it, like Theo's got blood on his face, and you kind of have the ringing in his ears, which is present throughout this movie. And he's, it's like it's a shocking moment because there all this action's going on, all this loud screaming, and then bang, and then it's kind of silent, and you realize, holy crap, Julianne Moore, not only did she just get shot, she just got shot in either the face or the neck. Yeah. And again, not a good place to get shot. There really is no good place to get shot, but that's one of the worst places to get shot, right? And so that's going on, and then you hear, like you said, he's like trying to like cover the wound, and you hear Miriam be like, put pressure on the wound, because of course she's a nurse, she has some medical experience in doing that. And they finally get to a point, and it's great because, like you said, Theo, the motorcycle comes up and is going to shoot Theo, and he opens the door, and the motorcycle completely wipes out and goes, ass over face, and the passenger on the motorcycle gets thrown in a really violent way. And so they kind of get away from all those people, and then they turn around and they're driving normally, and all of these cops come shooting by in their cars, and one of the cop cars turns around and comes after them and pulls them over. And Luke's like, I got to pull over, I can't outrun them. And so then these two cops get out and they're like, where's your, get your passports out, ID cards. And so everybody has them. And then as like one of the cops is like, sees that and starts to talk on his radio on his shoulder, Luke shoots both of them like 8 times and kills them. And Clive Owens is like, what the hell are you doing? And just like, oh my God, I mean, this is like gone from 0 to 1,000,000 in terms of bad for Clive Owen. And so, because like now he's in it, right? Now there's, he's at least an accessory to killing police officers, right? And you're right. It is an unbelievable scene. It is intense. It is surprising as hell that here's Julianne Moore, who is, you could argue is the biggest star of the movie at this point. Yeah,
probably at the time, yeah.
I think her body of work, from stuff she did in the 90s made her, I think, more of a person. And Clive Owen was coming on as someone, but I don't think he was quite as big as her. And to have her, come in, and literally she does 2 scenes in this movie before this one. And then she's gone. That's a shock, right? That's a Psycho moment with Janet Leigh. And it's unbelievable. And again, like we said, the way that they shoot it, like the camera is inside the car and it moves around. And so it's in the front seat looking back at Clive Owen. It spins around so we can see out the front windshield. Then it spins back. Just the filmmaking is just so awesome and intense that you cannot help but just be sucked into the story. And again, doing some research, the car, first of all, Chiwetel Ejiofor is driving the car for real. It's not on like many times it'll be like on a truck, on a flatbed truck or something, right? So they're driving. The director and all the couple people that are running the camera are on the roof of the car. And the car had it was a specially designed thing that the windshield could flip down to allow the camera to spin around and be out like on the hood area of the car looking back in, and the seats could slide back. So the actors would actually almost be like laying on their back. So the camera could slide around in front of them in their position. I mean, just amazing stuff that they did. And again, there's a little digital trickery in there as well, because some things they couldn't do as one take, but when you watch it, it looks like it's one take, and it's unbelievable. Unbelievable. And after
I put
that,
my notes.
Oh yeah,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say,
No,
when
go ahead.
that's when that scene ends, my thought is always like, oh my God, how can they top this? Yeah, just wait. All right. Because the scene at the end in Bexhill is even more incredibly tense and scary. It's unbelievable.
I agree. And I put in my notes about this that to me, the most important thing about that whole scene is you immediately know that all bets are off as soon as Julian is shot, because like you were saying, to kill off a main character and a famous actress like that so early in the story is so pivotal, and it says a lot. Like you made a comment about I forget what you said about some other movie where someone was killed early, but to me,
Janet Leigh in Psycho.
Yeah, but I always look at Drew Barrymore and Scream. That shaped that whole movie and everything you felt, because you went into that movie going, oh, it's this horror movie, and I love Drew Barrymore, and she's in the pictures for the movie, and da-da-da-da, and then you went to see it, and you're like, holy shit. Yeah. Like, it's not what you were, and this is a very similar thing. Julianne Moore, indie movie goddess, very popular, and she's not top billed, but she's, whatever, she's in this movie, and you're like, oh, Julianne Moore, I love her, she's great. And then you're like you said, you're like 20 minutes into the movie, 15 minutes into the movie, and she's dead.
She's dead. Yeah. Well, and like you said, the expectation is, oh, this is going to be a movie where Clive Owen and Julianne Moore run around and save the day.
Right, and that's not it at all.
And very similar, I think, when Tom Skerritt gets killed in Alien. Although Tom Skerritt, not nearly the box office draw that Julianne Moore is, but just in terms of the character he's playing in the movie, you totally expect if he's not going to be the sole survivor, he's going to be the guy that saves everybody. And no, that is not what happens, right? And you're right. Once that rug is pulled out from under you as an audience, you're right. You're like, I don't know where this movie's going to go now.
Yeah. It's and what's crazy is so from there they end up at this farm. They need to have like a safe house. So they go to this safe house, and everything really falls apart. It's helpful to have the closed captioning on in that scene, because there's a lot of like Theo overhearing conversations.
Yes.
And there is some yelling, so you don't have to worry about a lot of it, but he does hear a lot of things that he shouldn't hear. Yeah. And before all of that, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think because a lot of it is spoken in varying English dialects.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the fishes are also, they're not necessarily English. They're lots of minorities and ethnicities that the closed captioning helps. It certainly helped me as a dumb American to figure out what the hell they're saying. So yeah, I agree. And when I watched it the second time and I had the closed caption, I'm like, oh, a lot more detail that is there if you can hear it and pay attention. So yeah, I agree. Yeah. Absolutely agree.
Yeah. So before he hears all these conversations, he can tell like there's unrest. You get there and, they were ambushed on the road. That wasn't supposed to happen. Everything's in a shambles. Right.
Right.
And then, he hasn't really warmed up to Key so far.
No. Well, Key certainly hasn't warmed up to him.
Yeah, she's been giving him crap in the car because his first thing when they get in the car, he's like, okay, I'm going to take a nap. Right?
He's like, are we going to do a big sing along? Good, I'm going to take a nap.
Okay, great. Yeah. And so it's surprising, like once they get there, they haven't been there for very long, and then Miriam's like, Key wants to talk to you. So he goes to her. She's by herself in the barn, and with the cows. And in this really very metaphorical, crazy moment, because she says this thing about how they surgically remove udders from, nipples from the udders of the cows so that they can have enough to fit into the machine that'll take out the milk and whatever. And she's like, why not make a machine that actually fits all of the udders or whatever? So she's just like, and you're like, okay, this makes no sense why we're having this conversation. And she's
he
just
even
like,
says that. He's like, is that what you wanted to talk to me about?
Are we talking about cows and udders and whatever?
Yeah.
And then, no, but slightly same, she takes her dress off and reveals that she is like 8.5 months
Oh
pregnant.
yeah, she is
And
really preggers.
She is really pregnant, and he is dumbfounded. He cannot believe. And now it's like everything makes sense. Because before, here, they're just trying to smuggle a person out. He doesn't understand her importance, but he's just along for the ride. And they run into problems because the world is problems these days. Well, now he understands. It's not just problems. She is this sort of beacon, this oh my god, it worked. Like someone can, so of course she's going to be poked and prodded and studied, and someone's going to, someone's going to claim, oh, she's our person. No, she's our person. Like she's going to become a pawn, basically. Right. And he can see a
political pawn.
Yes, and he can see it all immediately, and everything dawns on him. So he gets all of that and understands the gravity of everything. So the next go ahead.
I was going to say that there's that scene. The other thing that happens right before that is, and again, this is through closed captioning, you find out that Luke is elected to be the new leader of the Fishes.
Right.
And so he's now going to call the shots. And there's a meeting that Clive Owen actually comes in and sees them. And they're like trying to decide, what do we do now that we have this pregnant girl? And, they say Julian's plan was to get her to the Human Project. And that's why they needed to get to the coast. But now they're not sure. Maybe she should stay here and have her baby. And Clive Owen is like, make it public.
Yeah.
And they all stop and look at him. He's like, you tell people. I mean,
right.
This is, and they're just like, you don't know what the hell you're talking about, right? And they they're like, you're not even in this group. You know what I mean? And so, so you're right. So there's that kind of moment. But yeah, there are two moments in this movie where I mean, Clive Owen is great in this movie. Don't get me wrong. The whole performance is strong, but there are two moments that stand out. And one of them is when he sees that she's pregnant. Yes. And the look on, I mean, and it's like when you see that look on his face, you should like make a little mental note that like get used to that look, because you're going to see it a lot more as the movie unfolds.
Yep.
But it's just this sort of like at first, because she's like unbuttoning her shirt and he's like, what do you, don't do that. Don't do that. Oh my God, what are you doing? And then she pulls off her blouse and you see her belly and he just stops. And like you said, I mean, it's like gobsmacked, right? And he's just like, very similar to like Sid when he's like, Jesus Christ, right? When he sees it, when he sees the baby, right? And it's a wonderful moment. And I think it really fits well with earlier when they get away from, after they shoot the cops, there's a scene where they like kind of take out Julian's body and they kind of wrap it up in a sheet and they're waiting for another one of the fishes to come and get them. And he kind of walks away from that and he like, gets out his little bottle, his flask of liquor. And he's going to take a shot and he gets out a cigarette and he's going to light the cigarette and he realizes that he has her blood all over his hands. Yeah. And he just loses it and just like crumples to the ground next to that tree and is like sobbing. Right. Because again, ex-wife. Right. Clearly had a history and was head over heels in love with her and they had a great life. And then the kid, the child that they had, their son Dylan, died in like a flu epidemic that broke out a few years, before the infertility thing happened. And that kind of was the end of their marriage. Right. And which is not uncommon. When a couple loses a child, it's very common that they what did she say? Like, I can't, look at you because you have his eyes. Yeah. And so again, every time you look at your partner, all you see is the child that's no longer there. So whatever. I think those are two great Clive Owen moments that happen. That scene in the woods when he breaks down, and again, like you said, when she reveals she's pregnant, and he's just sort of like, holy crap.
Yeah.
So yeah, a wonderful, wonderful moment. And we also, I think. Isn't that where we kind of find out Miriam is kind of Basil Exposition in this movie? If there is a character at all that is Basil Exposition, again, the director isn't really fond of exposition, but if there is one, it's her, because she's the one that kind of spouts the most information about like what happened in the past, what the plan was, what they were trying to do, all that we get from her. And we find out she's a midwife, and that's why she's with Key to kind of help her through her pregnancy. And we find out that they were trying to get to the coast because supposedly the Human Project has a boat it's a hospital ship, but it's disguised as a fishing boat, and it's going to stop at at one place like the next day, and then another place 2 days the day after that. And one of those, they have to get to one of those places before. It's not going to be there long. If they're not there, it's going to leave. But the idea is to get Key onto the ship. They will take her to this. They say it's like they have a base in the Azores Islands, which is in the Atlantic, and that's where she'll be safe, and they'll raise the baby. And obviously, they will, like you said, study her and try and figure out how did this happen. And And so we get that, and then we also get a little bit of the backstory that, all the miscarriages happened when she was working in a hospital, and it started out at like 6-7 months in the pregnancy, and then suddenly it was much earlier, and then people stopped getting pregnant, and that was sort of the end, and so on. So again, a little bit of info dump there, but it does push the story along.
Yeah, absolutely. Then we get a really great action sequence.
Oh my God. Another one.
I know. He overhears, the ultimate betrayal, which was, like we were saying, they had Julian killed.
Yeah.
Because they disagreed with how she was handling the whole Key situation, and they're looking to make like the next step in their revolution, as it were.
The uprising, as they call it.
Exactly. And, everyone was disagreeing on what the next steps were, and everyone disagreed with how Julian was sort of handling everything. So they had her killed. So the whole thing that happened on the road was staged and happened for a reason, which explains why they were able to get away. So Theo hears that and understands that they have to get the hell out of there. Well,
he hears that, and then he also hears he wakes up in the middle of the night because he hears a motorcycle come into the outside, and it's Patrick, which is Charlie Hunnam, and we find out he's the guy who was driving the motorcycle back at the scene with the car, and the guy that was sitting behind him who shoots Julianne Moore was like his cousin, who is like, he has with him, but he's like on death's door. So Charlie Hunnam is out for blood, right? Yeah. And so we get the conversation where Luke says, you know what, we're going to keep the baby. She's going to have it here. She's going to stay with us. And then Charlie Hunnam is like, what are we going to do with Theo? And he's like, we'll kill him tomorrow when the girl can't see. Like, we'll get her out so she doesn't see it, so she's not freaked out. So he's like, oh yeah, we got to go.
I'm not dying, and she's got to get out of here to keep everyone safe. So he wakes everybody up, and then they are able to sort of slowly make it outside. It's great because little things that come back and help out. When they first get to the farm, there's 2 dogs that are there, and the dogs come up to Theo and they allow him to pet them, and they don't bark. They like warm up to him. And the guy who's a guard at the time makes a point of saying something. He's like, oh, they like you. They never like anybody.
They don't like anybody.
They don't like anybody. So that helps, because when they're trying to get out of the house quietly and whatever, the dogs are there, and he literally just puts his hand out to like quiet them. And they listen. They do.
They're just like, hey, what's up?
Otherwise, any other moment they would have said that, hey, somebody's trying to escape or whatever. So he very quietly, they hide behind the cars, and he goes one by one and pulls, like a cable from the engine, or pulls like an important connection apart, so that, there's one car, he disables it. Then there's another one, he disables that one. And then the last car is the car that they showed up in and they were going to use. And another little bit of information when they first got there is Luke makes a comment about, if you're going to use that car, make sure you have to jump it first.
Yeah, to push start it, I think.
It needs to be jumped. So Theo doesn't know that. He didn't hear it, or it didn't permeate. So he starts the car. He goes to start the car, and
nothing.
Son of a bitch. And I appreciate it because in most movies that would happen anyway. Oh, of course, the car works fine, but as soon as you need it as a getaway car, it doesn't. Then
it doesn't start. Yeah.
They actually wind it up and tell you in advance, this car is a great car and it works fine, but it needs to be jump started or push started to be able to go. But it's perfectly fine. But you know what I mean? Like they normally wouldn't have like the explanation. They would just be like, oh, this car all of a sudden doesn't work anymore as like a total stereotype. So it was cool. You got the little tidbit if you were paying attention. So then ensues the craziest getaway scene ever. Oh. So they are like trying to like drive down the road to get out of this farm. And they're just in neutral and trying to start and they can't get it to. They make it past all of these people, someone, and Patrick, Charlie Hunnam, running up.
Sprints.
And Key opens the door and knocks him down.
It's hilarious. He goes flying into this like haystack and you're like, oh my God, Charlie Hunnam, are you okay?
And I'm like, wait a minute, we don't care about you. So they make it to the bottom of the hill. They still can't get the car started. And eventually they turn it around. They push the car and they get out of there. But oh my God, it was like in slow motion, this getaway.
Oh my God. Well,
and it was so tense and so crazy, but it worked and they did get away.
Right.
And what's great is Miriam comes with them. Miriam knew where the next few I forget how it was. It was like she knew like what the next like checkpoint was or where they could like reach out to someone or whatever.
Well, so she knew where the boat was going to stop the next 2 nights.
Mm-hmm.
And she also knew the system that Julian had used to contact the Human Project, and it was like they never talked to someone face to face. It was always like she said, like everyone had a mirror. So it's like I would hand a message to you, you would then hand the message to someone else, they would hand them, and so it would kind of work its way up, and then Julian would finally get it. She would then answer the message and then send it back. So. Which again, to Theo, he's just like, oh my God, you've never actually talked to these people. How do you even know they're real? And so on. But I would point out that in the escape attempt, the one very important thing is that Theo is sleeping when he hears the motorcycle. It wakes him up. So he gets up and is like goes to the window and kind of overhears this conversation. And then he immediately is like, we got to go. So he is not wearing any shoes.
And isn't for like the rest of the movie.
Oh, I know. And so he steps outside right into that mud and he's just like, oh crap. Yes, he does have socks, but still. So so he's like literally pushing this car down this like, dirt driveway in his bare feet, right? Or socked feet. And I mean, oh my God, right? And I mean, finding a pair of shoes becomes like a mini plot in this movie for Theo for the rest of it. But yeah, when Charlie Hunnam the other thing too is that they're all armed to the teeth, but they don't want to shoot because Key is in the car. And they don't want, obviously all they got to do is kill her, and then they lose all the stuff they want to get out of her for, politics wise, to use her as this political thing. And so they can't really shoot at them, which really helps. But you're right. It is like tense because it just takes forever for them to get away.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I mean, how often do you see like a getaway that is like kind of in slow motion like that?
Oh.
It's still just as tense as if they were just as tense as the one where they were backing up and they were surrounded and they were going as fast as they possibly could. This is just as tense because you're like, oh my God, they're almost there. They're almost there. They're almost there. They're going so slow. Just push the car.
Well, and
so
then,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say when finally they get it started and Theo jumps in and Miriam is driving and they're driving away. There's this great shot looking like from the hood of the car at the towards it. So we see them sitting in the front, Key's in the back, and then out the back window you see Luke and all the the fishes, and they're running after the car, and the car is like slowly widening the gap, right? And after a while, they all stop because they're like, "Yeah, crap, we can't catch them." But I mean, it's just an incredible shot, the way that they show all that. Yeah, it's just, and like you said, with not a lot happening, it is unbelievably tense.
Yes. And it's great because, you know, you kind of figure that we're going to, you know, go down this path again, no pun intended, but they're like, well, we need a safe house. And he's like, I know where we can go. So they clearly go to Jasper's.
Yes.
Which is great. And they have this really great couple of scenes with Jasper. The best is when he gets Miriam stoned and gets her to cough the strawberry cough.
Strawberry cough.
Yeah. Which is great.
And she, by the way, Theo could not taste the strawberries, but she said she could.
Yeah.
Which delights Jasper to no end.
Oh, of course. And, you know, he overhears them talking a little bit because they're asking questions about Theo and Julian and Dylan. So there's some backstory. So that's really nice. And there's sort of some lovely moments there. And, you know, the picture and Key says it out loud. Oh, Dylan, he looks just like him. Like Dylan has his eyes or whatever. Yeah. And so it's, you know, so you know, it's not just Julian saying that, and it's, you know, her grief saying it. It really was true. It did look like his son did look like him. And so you get all of that sort of backstory. Mm-hmm. And, you know, in the prior Jasper scene, you know, he tells the story about how he sells his weed to the guy. You know, he's very close to a big development where they're keeping all the refugees called Brexil. And, you know, but they're keeping them under guard. Think of it as kind of like, you know, the ghetto in, you know, Warsaw in Poland when they had all of the Jews in one area, but they kept it all guarded. Right. It's a similar kind of thing, except there's no working happening. They just have them all in there and are keeping kind of like slight close tabs on them. I don't know. And so he is selling his weed to this one guy who is a guard there at the Brexhill sort of encampment, you can call it. And so he comes up with this idea that in order to get away, like they can get a boat or whatever, but instead of trying to sort of like go through or go around Brexhill, that they should just be captured and be brought into Brexhill. Like as if they're refugees. So they need to pretend that they're refugees and they'll just get dumped in there. And then they can go from there with like, you know, so it's so cute because he's, you know, he's just this political cartoonist guy, but he's got this like hippie rebellious spirit. And then he shows up because he's set up this whole thing with this guy. He's like, you know, you're going to go there and you're going to ask for this guy, Sid, right? So that's when we first hear about Sid.
Yep.
And he's just so proud of himself that he's set this all up. He's like, you're going to do this and you're going to do that and blah, blah, blah. And eventually they were like, oh, wait, like, why aren't you coming with us? And he's like, no, man. He's like, I'll stay here. And because there's an alarm at the gate that the fishes have found.
The fishes all show up, yeah. And then there's like it's like all of them. There's like 5 or 6 carloads full of them there, and they're all armed to the teeth.
Yeah. So it becomes clear that they have to move quickly, and he's like, no, I'll stay behind, and I'm gonna tell them that you went another way. I'm gonna be like, yeah, he was here, but they went that way, so that you guys will have a little bit of a head start, and you can get out of here. So they drive around and they watch from a vantage point. And Jasper, you know, he's there with the fishes, and, you know, Luke is there. And so is, you know, Patrick and all the people we've seen in these previous scenes, you know, and they come up and ask him, you know, have you, you know, we're looking for, you know, Theo and these other people. Have they been here? And because they don't even know if they've been there yet. And instead of being, you know, oh yeah, they were here, mate. You know, they went that way. If you go, you can probably catch them. Instead of doing that, he's Jasper, and he says, "Pull my finger," and he like entices them. But we also know that when they showed up, just as they were about to show up, he had taken out the Quietus stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So he really knew that
Oh yeah.
he was about to die.
Yeah.
And he was okay with that. He had come to grips with that. And you knew that when he took out the Quietus kit and whatever, and then they show up and things don't go the way he said that they would when he tried to get, because if he had said, oh no, I'll sacrifice myself, then Theo wouldn't have left.
Right.
He had to have, he realized how important this whole mission was. And he was fine with going, and this was a good reason to go, and his rebellious spirit, etc. But Theo still had to see Jasper be shot.
Oh yeah,
and it was terrible. It was really terrible. And as he's going back to the car, Miriam went to go touch him. He says, "Don't fucking touch me."
Yeah.
This is he got pulled into this whole thing, and now I would say, Julian, who he had this great history with, there was this sadness, obviously, but they had history.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jasper, who was the person who's closest to in the world, they're both gone now.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got to deal with that. And he understands the importance of this whole mission, but it doesn't change the fact that the two people he probably considered closest to in the world are gone now.
Right. Yeah.
So
he literally has nothing left now.
Yeah. And they do get away, which is good. They're able to get away, which is really good. But it's not without a price, so you're able to see, there's a couple of different moments where, yes, it was fabricated, the whole death of Julian, but, they were able to get away from those marauders but in his mind, before he found out the truth, they were able to get away, but at a price. Yeah. And in this instance, they were able to get away again, but at another price.
More of a price, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. When they shoot Jasper, they ask him, have they been there? And he says, "Oh, I haven't seen him in a few weeks." And then I think Charlie Hunnam comes out and he has the map book that they were using, and he says they're going to Bexhill. And so then they ask Jasper, like, is that true? Is that where they're going? And that's when he goes, "Pull my finger." And Luke shoots his finger off.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. And then he asks him again, "Where are they?" And he doesn't answer. So then they shoot him in like the leg. And then again, Jasper, because he's like, "I'm going out. I'm going to go out and just be a wanker like little Diego." He gets up, he stands back up, and he tells him again. He holds his other hand up and goes, "Pull my finger." And then Luke shoots him in like the chest, and that's it for him. But one of the things that happens is Patrick comes out of the house with the map, and he says, "There's a dead woman in a wheelchair in there." So Jasper used the Quietus to make sure that Janice was dead as well, so that she wouldn't suffer.
Yeah, so because if this didn't go well, he knew it wasn't going to, obviously.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But he didn't want her to die this way. He wanted her to have her sort of peaceful. And when he was telling the story before, when he talked about using it on the rats, he was like, they get a very peaceful death.
Yeah. He says like the little instruction booklet is telling the truth when it says it's painless, because he's like, "I've seen it. The rats they go out with a smile." Yeah. The Jasper, when he goes out, it's again, because it's shot so far away, because we're really like up where Theo is watching, and he's like up on a hill, right? And he's like in the woods looking down. So it's very, you're removed from the violence, but it's still right there in your face. Yeah. And, and again, like I said, Jasper is like the most, like, I think, audience friendly character in the movie, where he's not going to hurt anybody. And he's cracking wise, and he's this hippie dude that's like high all the time, and it's like, just calm down, man. It's gonna be okay, And for that to be that guy to go out like that is just shows you how bad it has gotten. That these people are like, you would think Luke in another time in another place, if he met that guy, would be like, "You're not a threat. You're not. We can leave you, and won't change what's going to happen," right? But in this instance, they're just like, "No, we're going to kill you because we can."
Yeah. And it obviously shows that they have no heart too, because because Jasper is nothing to them. He's an old man. There's a dead woman inside, and so killing him or not killing him won't change anything, and they just choose to do it because and it really shows who they are. I mean, obviously they talked about the whole killing of Julian, but I think him seeing the death of Jasper really is just like these guys are all my enemies.
Yeah. There's no reconciling with them at all. Yeah. And I think too, we should have to point out that there's a great little scene where Theo is trying on all of Jasper's shoes to try and find a pair that fit. And the only thing that he ends up with, I love it, are flip-flops.
I love it. Yeah. It totally made me think of that scene in Castaway where he's like, you know, the dude that died, the co-pilot or whatever that washes up on the shore. He's like, the one person who's here, you know, and has shoes smaller than his feet smaller than my sister, you know. Yeah, well, and he ends up having to cut him, but he makes him work.
Yeah, I think that line's actually from Die Hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because McClane doesn't have any shoes, and then when he kills the one terrorist, his line is like, you know, the one guy I kill has feet smaller than my sister. So I think it pops up a couple of times, but anyway, I just love that they continued that little plot line of, oh yeah, Jasper or Theo doesn't have any shoes.
yeah, and when he gets there too, he's soaking his feet.
Yeah,
because he did all of this. Oh. He was running down the hill, and you know he didn't give a shit if he like stepped on rocks or whatever. He had to get out of there. He was running for his life.
Yeah.
But once he's able to stop, it's like, okay, I'm gonna soak my feet a little bit here.
Oh yeah, and you know it's got like the Epsom salts and all that stuff. And it's just like, oh thank God, you know.
Absolutely.
So. All right, so we got to get to Sid.
Okay, so the next thing they do is they got to meet up with Sid, which is at this elementary school, which is very it's very creepy that they're there.
Yes.
And Sid shows up, and first of all, you got to say about Sid. I mean, he's got like this armored vehicle and everything because he's he's part of the military, and he's a guard at this Brexel installation or whatever. And the casting, he's a really great character actor. I think he's Scottish, Peter Mullen. Mm-hmm. And he's done so many great things, but I know him mostly because he's from Westworld.
He's in Westworld. He's Daedalus in Westworld. Yeah. I think that's the thing that people are most familiar with here.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at his IMDb credits, it's a lot of British stuff that probably is available here, but something you might not seek out, being American. But Westworld is definitely I think the thing that people are here will be like, oh yeah, like when he comes on the screen and you hear him talk, and if you've seen Westworld, you're like, I know who I've seen that guy before.
Yeah, but it's great because he does a couple of yelling scenes and whatever, and it's like, to me too, like he's got a really great tiny role in Braveheart.
Yes.
And he's in the scene where they're all lined up in front of the king and whatever. And he's like, all right, lads, I'm not going to die for these, because it's all the lords and whatever. Mm-hmm. And he's the one that leads the charge to get the common men out of there.
Right.
And it's just like, when he starts yelling, you're like, oh, yeah. That's Peter Mullen. Yeah.
That's Peter Mullen. Yeah. It's
Sid.
Inspired casting. He's so great in this movie.
He's great. So Sid's great.
Oh.
Sid talks about himself in the third person. Really great. I mean, that's such a great little. So you have to question: is he slipping, like sanity wise?
Oh, sure.
Anyone who's got any kind of like real mean streak is going to end up in the military once it seems like everything's starting to fall apart. The people that are gonna like be like, I'll do it.
Yeah.
You gotta kind of question those people. Like, oh no, I'd love to kill my fellow man. Please sign me up. And he certainly seems like he's exactly the type. He seems like he's, the entire time we see him, is just barely like by his fingernails hanging on to reality.
Mm-hmm.
Just barely.
Well, and we find out in a later scene that he he's taking care of his mom who's dying of cancer.
Hmm.
So again, kind of like his, world, like people that are close to him that he cares about, that care about him, going away.
Right.
And dying in a horrible way, I'm sure,
Of
so
course.
so yeah, but what I love is that he's helping them because he loves Jasper, and he even points out, Sid could get the weed from the gangs and it would be cheaper, but Sid likes Jasper because Jasper's he's a coot, but he's honorable and he loves his weed. You know what I mean? And so,
exactly.
I always get the sense with him that he's clearly in it for himself, but there is a weird sense of like honor with Sid, in that Jasper went and asked him to help do this crazy thing of breaking these people into the camp. And he's like, okay, I'll do it. And think about it. If he gets caught, he's screwed.
Yeah.
So, this is not like just like a simple, thing. This is quite an ask. And he does it because Jasper asked him to. And granted, he goes home and he sees them on the news, and then he decides, well, I can exploit this for my own advantage. And so then the loyalty's gone. But at least at the beginning, you get the sense that there's a little bit of loyalty there. And you're right. Definitely he is losing it. He probably didn't have a lot of it to begin with, but whatever he had left, he's losing at this point. But he's so great. He's so funny when because remember Jasper says, like, tell him he's a fascist pig.
Yeah.
And so Theo goes out and goes, you're a fascist pig. And then he gets out of the car and he's like, what did you say? And he's like, I was told to tell you you're a fascist pig. And then he opens up his baton and he's like, what did you say? And you're like, uh-oh. And then he just starts laughing.
Abort.
Yeah, like, we need to go. This is not working. Yeah. Yeah, well, I do. I love Sid. I love it. He's such a fun little weird character in this movie that is just great.
And it's great because when he gives them instructions on, what they're going to do, because he gets them in the back of the truck, and the whole plan is he's going to bring them in. They're going to be processed as if they're refugees.
Yep.
And refugees are considered illegal aliens, and they're going to be put inside this Brexil facility.
It's a refugee camp. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a refugee camp. They took over this whole town. It's all it's security gates and guarded and whatever. And that's the plan. Right. And then from there, they're supposed to meet this one woman, Mariska, and there's going to be a boat involved and blah, blah, blah. So that is like the like nuts and bolts plan. So they get there. They take them inside. Now, meanwhile, as soon as they get on the truck, Key's like, and her belly hurts. And you're like, oh no, son of a bitch, this is not good. And Miriam's trying to like lighten the situation. She's like, oh, the contractions are only like 8 minutes apart. I'm like, girl, that's not good.
Yeah, right.
If you said 20 minutes apart, I'd be like, oh, good, we got time. So they're taken off of Sid's vehicle. They're then processed and put onto a bus.
Well, see, that's the thing. I don't believe that's what they get Sid to do, is they get them on the bus without being processed, because literally they get out of his car and get into the bus.
Right.
So I think
in
that's
any other world. Yeah, in any other world, they would have been asked a million questions or put whatever.
And they have to be documented and photographed and all that stuff. Yeah.
Right. So him being able to put them on the bus means they are cleared to be put inside the camp. Otherwise, they'd be killed or done, whatever.
Well, they'd identify him and so on. So, yeah, I mean, it's a huge thing. So they get into the camp and there's no record of them ever going into the camp. So
Correct.
Yeah.
So they're on this bus, and the bus, then it's more like a school bus thing. So the school bus has some other people on it as well, other refugees. And as they're getting closer and closer to Brexil to be brought in, to be sort of sorted and then brought inside through the gates, as it were, Key is then like, I'm really like starting to, they're getting a little closer. And of course, Theo's like, breathe. And Miriam's like, they've been doing a lot of like very Buddhist, very hippie, like chanting and stuff. And so there's some chanting. And there's a moment there where Key's like, I don't want to fucking chant. Like, I'm in pain. And
right.
And so it's getting worse. And then out of nowhere, she's just like, I'm all wet. And you're oh, that's bad.
No.
That's water broke and whatever. So when they go to take them off of the bus, there's a what's it called? There's a moment of I guess a confrontation. I couldn't think of the word. There's a confrontation because Key's in pain and can't really stand. She also broke her water, so there's water and like fluids and whatever everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to sort of distract from that. Because the guards like, come on, let's go, get up. This is an arrest home pretty much. Yeah. Get up. It's, you got to get off the bus or whatever. And Miriam does the distracting thing. And she starts like, pretending she's like some holy roller and she's praying and whatever, and totally distracts the guard to try and take focus away. And he's trying to help as well, because Theo has a moment where he's like trying to act like a refugee. He can't act like he's British because that wouldn't make any sense. So he points to Key's like water and he's like, oh, piss, like
caca.
And he's trying, caca. And he basically is trying to say that Miriam did it. Right. Like he's pointing toward her, and Miriam like takes the bait. She's like, she acts like so this guy takes it hook, line, and sinker. And he grabs Miriam by the hair, drags her off the bus, and she is thrown with a different group of people that are on the ground, knees, hands locked behind their head,
bags on their head.
Yeah, doesn't look very good. And as they, and Theo and Key start to move off the bus to go be brought through the gates, as they are leaving, you can see the last image you have of Miriam as they put the bag over her head.
Yeah.
So you have to assume that she was obviously killed.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the guard gets on the bus, and there's a guy sitting in front of them who's kind of like whimpering to himself, and the guard like picks him and goes, you, and they drag him off, and then he sees Key and is like, you too, come on. And that's when Miriam kind of sacrifices herself to like, no, take me, without saying take me. She just sort of makes a nuisance of him. He hits her a couple times, right? She's got a bloody nose. And finally he's like, fine. And he grabs her. And that's when he turns back to look at Key. And that's when Theo's like, no, she pissed all over. Piss, caca. And then the guard's like, you people are animals, and then he leaves, right? And he goes out, and and there's this kind of chilling scene where the bus pulls out and you see Miriam and they're putting the bag on her head and they're forcing her down on her knees. And then the bus like leaves the shot, but then entering the shot is like 6 refugees, and they're all on their knees and their hands are tied behind, zip tied, and they're all got hoods. And then they leave the shot, and then there's another group of refugees, and they're like all in like their underwear, and they're up against this like military truck, and there are guards that are threatening them, and then they leave your view, and then the last thing you see is behind the truck are like 10 refugee bodies that the military guys have laid out in a row. And you just kind of get the sense that clearly the camp can only hold so many people. Right. So they have to weed it down even further. Yeah. So, hey, if once we hit the number, anybody else, well, sorry. Sorry, we can only take so many today. You're shit out of luck. Yeah. Which again, I mean, it's that if that's not a direct, lift from the Nazis, I mean, it's chilling. And the fact that it just like with what the Nazis did, the fact that the guards are just going about it like it's normal. Yeah, is absolutely. Even more chilling, and it's just a job. And once you get to that point too, look at how brainwashed they are, where he's like, you're all fucking animals. The guy who is the guard, he didn't probably start out that way. You have to be taught that and learn that and feel that like by seeing it. So it's he grew into that, from all of the things he's seen, and it's just so interesting to see how people just sort of fall in line and do what they're told in that instance.
Yeah, that's a haunting thing to see. Like, well, Miriam's at the end, and you're like, oh, well, they're putting the bag on her head, but that seems bad. And then you're like, oh, and then the progression of the different groups of refugees you see, it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse, and you're like, oh God, oh God. And honestly, it's just like the Jasper scene. They can't react to it. They just have to be like, shit, another person.
Yeah.
Sacrifice themselves for this, and we have to. So it gives you almost like a resolve of like, well, we have to make it then, because these people have sacrificed themselves.
And you get the sense that Miriam is a good person, right? That she wasn't in on killing Julian. She was she genuinely concerned about Key and her health and her safety and the safety of the baby, right? So she's not in on all the political stuff that's going on. And yet, again, what do we see in this movie is that all of the decent people are getting extinguished, right, as this story is going along, right? And yeah, it's depressing as hell. Where you're like, oh no, I liked her,
It's bleak, one would say.
Very, very dystopian. Yes,
very dystopian, if you were, as it were.
Let's get to the good stuff at Bexham.
Yeah, exactly. So the next step that they're supposed to make is they're supposed to make contact inside with a woman named Mariska that Sid points them out to. And he's like, she'll get you a place and then I will come find you.
Yeah.
So that's what they've been told. So flash forward to they're sort of walking along the streets of Brexel, and Mariska, who is I think they're trying to say she's like gypsy. He calls her a crazy gypsy lady.
Yeah.
And makes it seem so the gypsies were of Romany descent. So you have this feeling that she, maybe she is, maybe she isn't. It's hard to tell because Sid is also, just like that other guard, is, taught to look down on any kind of immigrants and anyone who's different. So she could just be like from a different part of Eastern Europe, and they just have labeled her as this. But she is put forward as gypsy. She is speaking in another language, so their comprehension skills are different. But she's got this little dog with her, but she's also just sort of like jibber jabbering the whole time. It seems like, just like Sid, she's barely hanging on by the fingernails as well. And you're like, great, we're supposed to put our trust in this woman who knows, man. So she leads them through, and there's this whole long drawn out scene where she's taking them up the stairs to some place for them to spend the night. Right. Mm-hmm. And she gets them. It's interesting because she gets them a room, and basically I think there were other people in that room, and she kicks them out. And they have this room, this space, and he's like, we want to be alone, whatever. It takes them a little bit to get her and the dog out of the room and all this other stuff. Meanwhile, this whole time, Key is like, she is clearly in labor. Yep. She is so poor, terribly in labor. And it's literally like, okay, good night, Mariska. Good night. Good night. Good night. Now. Okay, thank you. Gotta go. And finally, it's just to get the door shut. And Key is just like, and so she gives birth probably less than 10 minutes later. Mm-hmm. And it's crazy because I put in my notes that I thought that it was weird because I was like, okay, it's so obvious that she's, the pain that she's in must be something that's labor related. And I was like, how is this I don't want to say how are they getting away with it, but kind of how are they getting away with it? She's walking through a crowd. She's going up the stairs. There's all these moments where the signs are so obvious. And then it dawned on me that no one has seen a woman in labor in almost 20 years.
Right.
These
Some people have never seen it.
So these young guards, that guy that said you guys are all animals or whatever, he seemed pretty young. He's probably only in his early 20s. He's probably, like you said, he's probably never seen the sounds or what it looks like when someone's in labor. And there's plenty of other young people who have, even if they had some kind of way back memory, it's just not triggering anything for them. So they are able to sort of, in plain sight, she's going into labor, walking around all these people and making noises. And they're just like, this place is weird, so you fit right in with all this weirdness at Brexel. Like there's all of these crazy members of society are here, and you fit right in.
Mhm.
You're just sort of, for some reason, you're in some kind of pain, and you keep like moaning out loud. We don't know what that means, but welcome to Brexel.
That's right.
It's pretty much like how it was. So yeah, so it's just interesting that I had such a hard time. I'm like, why are they getting, pretty much getting away with it? And then I really had to sort of
It hit you.
remind myself
Yeah.
that they haven't seen this in so long, and that they're just not used to it. They really just aren't.
No.
So,
No.
yeah.
No.
So yes, we have the labor scene. It's really great. Especially since there was all this, people were expecting a boy, really,
Yeah.
and she has a girl.
She has a girl.
And they're both so exhausted from everything. She just falls asleep, and so does Theo. And the next thing you know, Sid is knocking on the door.
Sid comes back.
And it's the morning, and they're not ready. They're not ready.
Well,
Like,
yeah. I think that actually, I don't think Sid was the plan was for Sid to come back. Sid was just supposed to get them into the camp, because
Okay.
the camp is where the boat is going to stop.
Right.
But then in the morning, Sid does come back, which is why they're surprised. And he's like, look, we got to go, because he says that like somebody blew up a hole in the fence, but it wasn't for people to get out. It was, and he says it's so fishes could get in, which tells you that Luke and Patrick and all those guys are probably
on their way.
If they're not in the town, they're going to be soon. And then Sid throws in this little bit of, and the military is going to just flatten the city. That's how they're going to deal with this. Because once the explosion happened, the Fugees had an uprising, and they've killed a bunch of the guards, and they're all armed now. They all have machine guns. And so like this is like an insurrection kind of a thing. And so the military's response is a typical military response of, well, we'll just, crush them. And so Sid is like, he says, I'm here to get you out before that happens. But as we find out,
he just really wants the money.
Yeah, he sees they're wanted, and he figures they're worth money. If he turns them in, he'll get a reward. And then he realizes that she's hiding something under her blanket. And he's like, what do you got there? And what do you got? And finally,
they're like, nothing.
And then finally he pulls the thing aside and sees the baby. And I love it because he's like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And then he like literally is like taken aback, right? And then he stares at it for a minute. And again, it's that look, that look, that gobsmacked look of like, oh my God, there's a baby. And like you said, no one's seen a baby in like almost 20 years. And then he says it again. He's like, Jesus Christ, and again, in his mind, though, it's not, I have to help you. It's, oh my God, whatever money they were going to give me is going to be even more now.
Yeah. Like he's seeing dollar signs, and it's adorable because while he's having that reaction, Mariska is over to the side and is like, she's just like,
she's having kittens,
keening to herself, and is like, oh my God, it's a baby. Oh my God. And in her native language, you don't understand what she's saying, but you get the idea. She sees it's a baby. She can't believe it. She's chanting.
It's a miracle.
It's a miracle.
And so then they get up to go, and that's when Mariska, basically says, no, he's bad man, and kind of the truth comes out. Sid pulls out a gun. And that's when he says, I saw you guys on the TV, you're wanted, and so I'm here for the reward. So I'm gonna turn, we're gonna go for a little ride, and turn you into.
Here's what's happening next.
Yeah. And so they make their way down the stairs, and then Mariska like pushes him on the ground, and then it's awesome. She goes and gets like a pipe and just beats the living crap out of him.
It's amazing.
It's awesome, right?
Yeah.
And they run down this hallway, and they find this door that's like it can't really open because a lot of the city is like you said, kind of falling apart. And so
there's lots of like rubble and stuff.
Yeah. And so Mariska gets out, then she takes the baby, and then Key gets out, and Theo just barely gets out. And of course, Sid is now he's recovered enough, and he's like shooting at them down the hallway as he's running. And you want to talk about just a gruesome death sequence. they get outside the door and they start moving away, and Theo sees like it looks like a car battery.
Yes.
And he picks it up because he's like, I bet Theo's going to try and get out this door because he's coming right behind me. And sure enough, Theo opens the door and sticks his head out. And I mean, oh my God, he just.
You mean Sid?
I'm sorry, Sid. Yeah, Sid does. Yeah. And Theo just clocks him.
Oh my God, it's great.
And it's like he hits him and bam, Sid's dead.
But there's a great moment there too where, there's been so much violence so far. Mm-hmm. And Theo has a moment after he hits Sid with the battery where he's still hanging on to it and he's looking, and that he's never done anything like that before. He's never hurt someone to that degree before. And he just has to, like, in that moment, sort of sit in the moment of that. And it's sad, but it's also, I'm glad that they took a second to really the gravity of it for him,
Yeah.
That he's not like these other people. He's not a soldier. He's not a rebel person. He probably wouldn't even know how to shoot a gun if someone gave it to him. You know,
an interesting fact, in the entire movie, Theo never once even picks up a gun.
Right. Which I think is super interesting. I like that.
I do too. Yeah.
And
so
go ahead.
I was gonna say we have to finish the storyline with his shoes. So
yes, he doesn't have any.
No, he's got the flip flops.
Right.
But then,
right.
So then Mariska takes them to a building where clearly, the people that are there have a lot of supplies and are in, like almost like they like if you need something, you go to them and you literally they've got the door with like the little steel bars opening about head high where like, you knock on it and they slide the little panel and they look at you, and there's the armed guy out front. And so she's talking to this guy that's in there, and like, we don't know what they're saying, but you get the gist of, she's like, we need to get in. And the guy on the other side's like, why? And so then they reveal the baby. And again, all these people are like, holy crap,
Yeah.
And so then the next scene, they're like in this nice kind of, bedroom, and they're feeding her key oranges, and Mariska's tickling the baby, and there's this other woman that's tickling the baby, and they're just like so like overjoyed that this little baby's here. And then it's so great because Theo is kind of, sitting and kind of pacing, not sure what to do. And one of the guards comes in and he's like, we found a boat for you and we're going to leave in an hour. And then he sets a pair of blue sneakers on the like table in front of him. And so it's like, finally Theo has some shoes to wear.
Thank you, Jesus.
Oh man. Because I think too, like when after he kills Sid and he starts moving down the rubble, doesn't he like hurt one of his feet?
Yeah.
And he's like
slides on because he's walking over rocks and stuff,
Yeah, right. And so I just it's just so visceral, because like when your feet hurt, you're like, you can't move, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just one of those parts where you're like, if my feet are bad, I'm in pain everywhere, So it's
and everybody has had that moment where you're like on a beach where like the rocks are sharper than you thought they would be, or the shells are sharper.
Mm-hmm.
We've all been in that moment, and you're like, ooh,
or the sand is really hot.
Yeah, exactly. So we've all been there, where we've been in a situation where we're barefoot, we probably shouldn't have been. It's hurting our feet, but it's temporary because we're just going to get to the end of, XYZ, and then we'll be fine.
Yeah.
So we're all there, and it's like, ooh, oh my God, man, just check every corpse you walk by and grab some shoes.
Grab some damn shoes, will you?
Yeah. He's not very apocalypse ready. You know what I mean?
Right.
Anyone
no, not at all.
Any others of these refugees, they would be doing the same thing. There's a scene later where they come back upon people that had already been killed, and they're being stripped of all of their stuff, which I thought was hilarious.
Yeah.
So they end up leaving to go meet up with the guy who had said, we'll get you a boat, meet us, XYZ. So they go to meet up with him, and then when they get there, that's when there's a big there's like explosions and stuff because the fishes have infiltrated.
Well, the fishes have infiltrated. The army is there, and again, there's like hundreds of Fujis that are armed to the teeth, roaming around as well. And you get the idea that this whole city is kind of exploded, and it's just this maelstrom of fighting. And they're
they're sort of stuck in the middle of it.
Right. They're trying to work their way through it. Right. And again, so they do. And you see these sequences where they're like moving down an alley, and at the end of the alley that they're heading towards, which is in the background, you see like 20 Fuji guys go running by, and they are all carrying machine guns, and then suddenly you hear firing, and then they turn around and they're running back into view, and then they're getting gunned down, and then these 2 or 3 army vehicles go cruising by with guys I mean, it's almost like I said, it's almost like watching a news clip of something that's going on in like the Ukraine or like in Gaza or something. I mean, it's that intense and real. And the fact that it's this super long take, because when they leave and try to get to the boat and they end up going into like that hotel or apartment building or whatever it is, I mean, that's like a 13 minute long sequence. Yep, sure, I mean, it's crazy. And so so they do, and they run into the military fighting the Fujis, and then you're right, kind of showing up there is all the fishes. And so Patrick and Luke and all of them, and they get the baby, and they get Key.
Yeah, and that's sort of like the next like sort of chunk of action is they take Key, they take the baby, and they flee, but they flee to this like apartment building. But they're still fighting, not so much with anyone Theo was involved with, but the soldiers are there. There's like a battle going on in between all of this. And meanwhile, they're like staging the battle from like the windows. There's like gunfire raining down and whatever. And Theo is just like single-mindedly like, I have to get Key back. Right. I have to get Key and the baby, and she's not safe and whatever. So he makes it into this building and is making his way up the stairs. And like the fighting kind of dies down a little bit. It's, there's little pockets of it here and there. But in the middle of it, he's trying to find his way. He knows they brought her in here. And then out of nowhere, you can hear the baby crying. And he starts to follow that noise. And it's interesting because as he's like following the noise and he's getting closer to where they have Key and the baby, there's other people who are living in this apartment building who, this battle is taking place in their home. They're like peeking out little doors here and there, and they're trying to see like they can hear the baby too, and they can't figure it out. And then, there's an explosion, they duck back in, but then they hear some crying. They poke their head back out a little bit. Like, it's just this interesting moment where he's looking for the baby. They can hear it. And then there's this like, battle going on all around him. And he's just sort of sneaking down the hallway. There's, different moments of battle happening here and there. Gunfire from there, over here, and left and right and whatever. And he comes upon an area where, does he kill Patrick?
No, we never see Patrick. What happens to him?
Okay.
When Patrick is going to shoot him, right? And so Luke leaves with a Key, and Luke tells Patrick, don't shoot him until we're out of sight, because he doesn't want to upset Key.
Right.
And so they turn the corner and leave, and then Patrick's, kind of unfortunately, Patrick starts to monologue a little, and is kind of gloating over Theo about how he's going to kill him, and that he killed his cousin who was only 18 and had his whole life in front of him, and blah, blah, blah. And then the army shows up again and starts just shooting. The army at this point is shooting at everybody that's out on the streets. And so Patrick goes running for his life, and then Theo goes after him. And the very last time we see Patrick is Theo comes up to the corner, and he peeks around, and he sees the building, the apartment building that he's eventually going to go in. And way at the other end of the street is Patrick. And as Theo starts walking towards him, we hear Patrick yell, Theo, and he goes running at him and starts shooting with a machine gun. And that's when Theo jumps into that bus
Yes.
And it's like a bus that doesn't move, but people are like living in it, and
Yeah.
all these people are in there, and they're all cowering and stuff, and he's cowering, and bullets are ricocheting all over, and Patrick comes running up and is shooting at the bus, and then we never see Patrick again. So I'm assuming he gets zapped by the military, but we don't actually see it.
Yeah. And when he does eventually, he makes it to the area where Luke eventually, it takes a while for him to get there, but once he gets to where Luke is sort of holed up, it's this like big open area, this bigger open apartment.
It's like the third or fourth floor of this building.
Yeah. And he's over to the corner, like with his back against the wall, like near the window so that he can, pop out and shoot every now and then. And Key is in a different part of the room. She's like, off to the side, and, Theo sees her, and there's this moment with, Luke and with Key and with Theo, as it's clear that Theo is going to grab her and they're going to leave. Luke is either injured and we don't know what's going on. Like he's acting like he's injured, but they don't show that he's injured.
Yeah.
He seems very sort of resigned in that moment, and it's hard to tell. They never show an injury, but you have this sense that he's almost sort of given up.
Well, he certainly doesn't. He doesn't move from his back is up against that wall, and he's just kind of. You're almost like, did you get shot in the spine? Is that what happened? Like where he's been wounded to the point where this is where he's going to make his final stand or sit in this case.
Yeah, and so he just and he's still Theo like shows his face, and he shoots a couple of shots in his direction, so he's still sort of quasi defending himself, but not fully, and allows Theo to come in, and they have this scene together, and and Theo is basically just like, I'm not here to talk, and he like takes Key by the hand and eventually just gets her out of there, and you don't see Luke again. And there's just, he's still like leaning out the window, shooting a little bit, like, but mostly just sort of sitting there and just taking it all in. And so, Theo leaves with Key, gets her, he helps her up and gets her out of there. And they're walking down the hallway, and all of these other refugees, they start like as before, where they were slightly curious. Now they really can hear the baby crying, and they want to see it and whatever. And they lean out. And then from the moment that Theo starts walking down the hallway, there's about a 2 to 3 minute span where there's barely any sound. There's no fighting. There's very little. Like if it is, it's like way in the distance. Like they really quiet it down, and he's just trying to make his way through. He eventually gets to the stairs, and all the people want to do, like there's injured people, there's sick people, and you can tell they just touch the baby's foot.
Yeah, they just want to,
They tap Key a little bit just to like, whatever, just to know if she's real. Who knows?
It's a miracle.
It is to them. It's absolutely a miracle. And so, nobody gets weird or mobs them. They just basically are so struck dumb almost, and they tap and they touch her a little, and it's all very sort of gentle, and he's walking down the hallway, and it's very silent. There's a couple of like, you can tell people are chanting a little, maybe praying, all in a different language, so you don't know what's being said, but you get this sense of wonder and miracle, like you were saying. They make it to the stairs, and they're starting to slowly go down the stairs, and at one point the soldiers have started to come in, and they're like run, 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 and they start to run up the stairs, and they stop, and they have a moment where the soldier that's right at the front sees Theo, and Theo really like, he leans back, and you can see that he's like looking down at Key, and you can almost like, he's basically saying, come on, man, this is what we're fighting for. Like, this is, everything's falling apart because this hasn't happened, and this is a miracle. You have to let me by. But there's no word said, nothing whatsoever. They just look at each other. All that happens is at one point, a soldier at some point says ceasefire.
Yeah.
Because there's some fire happening. And after they say ceasefire, and he moves through, the stairs, through the lobby of the building, he makes it out the front door. They start walking past all the soldiers. Every single soldier is just in awe, and they are just watching as they walk by, and it's just they sort of widen the path a little, let them through. There's a couple of soldiers outside that, do the sign of the cross, and they kneel, and it's this moment of reverence. They make it outside, and they're just about past the soldiers. And like I said, it's been quiet and serene and calm this whole time. And there's like a wider shot that shows them, sort of walking toward, like, say, a camera is further back, and they're walking toward the camera, and you can see the building behind them. The soldiers are all turned, watching them go. And then there's like a shoulder powered, like, missile launcher kind of explosion that comes out the window and smash, and everything goes back to the way it was. It's almost like they were going in slow motion, and then they went back to normal speed, and everything starts to go with chaos again. Mm-hmm. And there's these explosions and shooting and gunfire, and he's like, he ducks down, and he's got his arm around Key, and he's just trying to get away. And it's like such an amazing sequence. I mean, you go from this, big drawn out battle to this 3 minutes of stillness, back into this battle, this war raging on, and it's just incredible. It's just so incredibly shot. There's so much nuance and the fact that there's moments of, like, reverence and beauty in the midst of that is just crazy, that they're able to sort of pause and have that moment. It's amazing. It's my favorite scene in the whole movie, is when he's walking through with her. I love it so much.
Yeah, it is. It's again, just the look on all of their faces as they're moving through. Like we said earlier, like, for most of these soldiers that are, like, in their mid 20s, maybe, late 20s, early 30s, they probably, if they've seen a baby, it was when they were very young, if at all.
Yeah.
And so this sort of, like, again, to quote Sid, Jesus Christ. I mean, they like, gobsmacked is just the term that comes to mind, that they're just, I'm seeing it, I don't believe it.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
And,
which is kind of why, like I felt like the refugee women, like, they were touching, mostly because they were like, there's that old feeling, that sort of, like, revival, tense revival-y feeling in Christianity of, like, you touch something that's miraculous, can some of it rub off on you?
Yeah, right.
So there's a little bit of that, it felt like, but I also, like I said, it felt like they needed to touch to be like, she's real, right? We're not having a mass hallucination.
Yeah,
so
we're not making this up. Yeah, right, exactly. Well, and like, when they're back up on the third or fourth floor with Luke, and Luke he kind of, intermittently he's shooting out the window at the army guys, and then he's talking to Theo, and one of the things he says is, he's like, I forgot how small babies are.
Yeah.
It's a really powerful line, where, I mean, it's just, it's kind of like, that's like the moment when Luke realizes what this was all about.
Right.
And that for a long time it was just kind of conceptual of, like, oh yeah, she's going to have a baby. Sure. But in his mind, he's thinking about all the political credibility that's going to give them. And then when he actually, because he's like, I held the baby, because he took her from Key for a minute. And he's like, he's like, I forgot how tiny and precious and small they are, and how incredibly beautiful they are, and it's just sort of that, like, oh my God, I get it. Like, I realize. And again, like we said, is he, like, mortally wounded at this point? Probably, because he doesn't really move all that much. So it's sort of like, as he's going out now, he kind of goes, I get it. I know what's going on. Now, he still shoots Theo, so it's not like he's completely changed. But, but yeah, it's a great line. I love the way that, first of all, I love that actor. He's great. Right. He's great at everything he does. He's a very talented dude. And whenever he's in a movie, I'm always like, it's going to be good. Right. At least his part is going to be good, and he delivers on that line. It's so cool the way he says that. He's just like, I forgot how tiny and precious they are, and you're just like, yeah that's right. Asshole, you didn't.
Yeah, that's a great line. And like you said, it took this moment that was very, like, hypothetical and made it real in a way that he was not expecting.
Right,
he didn't
right.
expect to like connect in that way that it changed everything for him. You can tell that plus, you know, the onslaught, whatever,
Yeah.
it changed everything in his head. It really,
Yeah,
really did.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just going, you know, more little tidbits in that scene that I loved. There's a bit right before Theo goes into the building. He like is, you know, moving through the street and diving behind pieces of rubble for cover and stuff. And he gets right in front of the entrance, and like these 10 or 11 people come out of the entrance with a white flag, and they literally they're like, we're British citizens, and the army just guns them down.
Yeah.
All of them, just machine guns them all, right? Because again, at this point, the army's like, we're gonna kill everybody, right? That's the order. Care. Yeah, anybody out on the streets is an part of the uprising, and we're gonna zap them. That was a really powerful scene, and it's just a throwaway scene, right? Because you don't know who any of these people are, and he can't afford to stop and look at them. He's got to get in there and find her. Right. So it just sort of happens right in front of you, and you're like, oh my God. And then it's gone. Right. You know,
right.
And you're on to the next atrocity, you know. And then just there's other little moments that I thought were really great where there's like a big big chieftain tank and like a smaller armored vehicle next to it. And somebody in the building takes out the smaller armored vehicle with like an RPG or a rocket or something. And so it blows up. And then the tank then fires just point blank right into the building, just blows a big chunk of it off.
Yeah.
And again, you know, the sound design, and you hear all of the debris falling and the glass and the brick and all. I mean, it just created this soundscape where you're like, yeah, this is like what being in the middle of a battle could sound like, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is that when he enters the building, again, I'm sure I'm reading way more into this than is there, but he enters the building, and then you start to hear this ringing sound in the sound design. And it basically, as he works his way up the couple flights of stairs, that's really all you hear. That you also hear the fighting and stuff, and the people chanting and singing and praying in the background stuff. But it's the predominant sound is this ringing sound. And he finally, when he gets up to where he sees her kind of hiding there and she's holding her baby, then it stops and we're back. And it just, earlier in the movie when they're on the platform after he's kidnapped and he meets Julian for the first time, and she says, we'll pay you, you could use the money. And remember, he gets all offended, like, I don't need your money, right? And so then she like signals to Luke and Patrick, okay, you can get rid of him now. And so they come and they drag him away. They put the hood on his thing, and she kind of stays behind. And so she's receding in the background as they're kind of leading him away. And she has this line where she's like, oh, by the way, that ringing sound you hear, that's the cells in your ears that are dying. And once that fades away, you'll never hear that frequency again. So enjoy it while it lasts. And then you get this scene where he comes in there and he hears this ringing, and then it stops and it goes away. And in my brain, I'm like, this is like the end of his life. That he's, even though he's not really dying yet, it's like he's at the end. And this is the last, you know, because once that ringing stops, pretty much right after that, he gets shot, and then, you know, he's on his way out. So again, a neat little way to me to bookend parts of the movie that I did not expect, and I did not notice it the first time I saw it. It was only when I was doing the rewatch for this that I'm like, holy crap, how did I not see that? So, but anyway, that sequence in Bexhill is unbelievable. The way it's so immersive, where you're like in the middle of all this fighting going on, and it's all around you, and yet they have to. Theo doesn't have a choice. He has to navigate through it somehow and try and survive to try and save her. And it's unbelievable. It's again suspenseful and intense and horrifying and exciting and visceral. I mean, it's amazing. It's just incredible filmmaking.
Yeah. And they do such a good job of hitting everything on all levels without in like a pandering way. You know what I mean? You don't feel like things are being spoon fed to you. You don't feel like they're knocking you over the head with anything. It's really just like helping you. You are literally, it's interesting how, you know, it is filmed in this sort of like documentary style, because I think you are meant to experience everything just as Theo is, you know, the, you know, lackadaisical beginnings leading all the way up to the urgency of, you know, I'm shot, but I have to see this through.
Yeah.
It's more important than anything else I've ever done. I have to do this, you know, and to see that progression and to know, like, to have been with him on that journey and know, like, you have that moment with yourself. You're like, if it were me, how, you know, I would probably do the same thing because of the journey that you go on from, you know, A to Z in this film. So it's incredible, the sort of the highs and the lows that they're able to achieve. Yeah, wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We go into the last sequence, and I just want to give a huge shout out because she could have been such a throwaway character, but really Mariska saves the day.
She does.
She comes through big time in the end and is still able to lead them through to this area where there's a boat waiting for them to use.
Okay, let's be fair. It's like a little rowboat, but it's a boat.
Oh, it's you know, this is an emergency situation.
Yes.
Any other situation, this would not really be. This is a boat in name only.
Yes.
Yes. It didn't really do a lot of water sports or whatever.
No.
So yeah. And it's great because they have all these different moments throughout the movie where it's like, well, you're coming with, aren't you? You know, and they have that moment with Jasper. Oh, you're coming with. And he's like, no. And they try so hard. Theo tries so hard to get Mariska to come with them, and she won't.
And she's like,
she basically is like, I am meant to be here. You have to go. You have to go do this thing. It's your destiny, basically. Yeah. And again, never speaks a word of English. You have no idea what she's saying, but everything that actress gives to the the other language she's speaking and the words that we don't know what she's saying, but we know what she's trying to say. And she is one of those people, like they were in that building. She's so dumbfounded by the whole fact that there's a baby, but she also knows that she's been given these tasks, and she sort of rises to those occasions. She knows, like, I have to come through on this thing or they're not going to make it. They have to get to this boat. I have to get them there. And it's just this wonderful moment. And when Theo's like, you have to come with, and she's like, she basically pushes the boat and pushes them out of there. And it's like, you go, like, you have to go. And she's like saying things, and you know that she's like blessing them as they go and saying whatever, but it's just this really beautiful. It's this tiny little moment with Mariska, and she was, you know, painted as this crazy lady, and she does have some craziness to her, but she does. She comes through in the end. Oh, and if it weren't for her, they wouldn't have made it, you know?
No, not at all. And the great thing is after they leave the fighting at the apartment building, they kind of come onto this street and it's empty. And right, there's nobody there. There's nothing happening. And then coming out of like one of the alleys or maybe a tunnel or something, Mariska just appears.
Yeah.
You know, and she's, you know, she wears that very distinctive red coat that you know, and you see her, and it's like, and she's like sees them and waves them over, and then the next thing you know, there she is, you know, and they're in that, like, I don't know, like a sewer or something which has access to the sea, and that's where the boat is. And you're right, you know, I often wonder if he wants her to come along because he knows he's like gonna die soon.
Right.
And so he's like, you know, another person here who's not going to die would really be helpful. Right. But again, we don't know that if you're watching for the first time, you don't know that he's, you know, Theo or Luke shoots at him and it looks like he's shot, but the way he gets her out of there and there's no obvious bullet hole or blood or anything, he doesn't appear to be, you know what I mean? So you're not really sure. And so you can't decide that at that moment that, okay, he wants Mariska to come along because he's been hit. You know,
Right. He does a good job of hiding the whole situation, which is great because one of the people he's hiding it from is Key. He doesn't want to upset Key or have her think that they're not going to make it because of this. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
he's got to really, like, you know, until you see it, you have really no idea what's happening.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so they row out to the buoy, which is where obviously where, you know, the girl in Jaws was killed, and that's where the boat's coming. It's gonna come right by there, and so then they're just gonna wait. And I think at that moment that he teaches her how to burp the baby, which is a very important skill. And I think that's when she tells him that she's gonna name it Dylan after his son, because as she points out, Dylan can be a girl's name too.
Yeah, which I thought was just an adorable little moment there, especially considering how they started out.
Yes.
Where she's like, "Oh, this guy, he's a drunk. Who is this dude?" Like,
and he's like, "I guess the pleasure's all mine."
yeah. That first moment was great. So he's starting to lose consciousness. He's getting weak, much weaker, and he just leans back and he expires. You know, he's bleeding and he bleeds out, you know.
Well, she sees the blood on in the boat, and she's like, "Oh my God, I'm bleeding," and he's like, "No, it's me."
Yeah.
And then she's like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Luke got me," and yeah. So I think literally the last thing he hears is she tells him she's going to name the baby Dylan, and then he kind of leans back and closes his eyes
on his face. Yeah.
You know, and that's it.
So she's there. And she's by herself for like a brief moment, and then the boat shows up. Mm-hmm. And when it does, it's my only quibble with the movie. Mm-hmm. It's my only I put on there that I think that calling the name of the boat Tomorrow was a little bit on the nose.
Yeah.
You know, I just think there's a little I mean, why don't you just call it Hopeful? Or, you know, something like that.
Secret hospital ship.
Yes, exactly. That's what they should have called it.
That's right.
It was stupid of them not to.
I know.
I wasn't sure. Like, I know where they were going with it, and it's cool. But like, for so many things in the movie to have not been on the nose, and for that to be that final moment to be like, oh, Tomorrow.
I get it.
Whatever. You know. I mean, it's tough. Like, how do you, and here's the other thing. Why name it at all? You don't have to name it. Just have it be a boat. It's a boat. Yep. And you have to wonder, is it the boat it's supposed to be? Because everything ends, you know, the boat, you see the people, and then it's done.
Yeah.
The movie's over.
It smashes to black, and you're kind of left
going, no.
Oh, wait, what does that mean?
Are those the Human Project people?
Yeah.
Are they who they're supposed to be? Is it somebody else? We don't know. Belly wounds take a long time to kill someone. He might have just passed out. Does Theo make it?
Right. Is Theo still alive? We don't know.
Yeah. We don't know. So I love that it's open-ended, that the ending is as open-ended as it is. I think it's like, for me, I feel like it leans more on the hopeful side of it. You don't know for sure, but you're a little more like, I don't know whether that's the boat, but just for me, I have a sense that it's something good, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. You're a real glass half full kind of person, so.
Not right now. My glass is half empty because I got a little tickle in the throat.
A little tickle in the throat there, huh? Right.
Yeah. But I don't know why that is. And maybe I've watched too many romantic comedies. It's too many like hopeful and, you know, good things happening in the end. But I just feel like the way, you know, the fact that let's say Theo does die. The last thing he hears is her saying she's going to name it Dylan. So he dies in peace. He taught her something, so he's able to sort of, you know, with the burping and all of that. So he passes on his knowledge, you know, and that's a positive thing. The boat itself is very brightly lit, and everything else that we've seen so far of the military, the government, and everything that's happening in London is dirty rubble. Not, it's just, there's nothing bright. Yeah, drab is a very good way to put it. And this boat is bright white. They've got like bright yellow lights on it and everything. So it's almost like it's its own beacon of hope. So I feel like they've sort of nudged you in the direction of hopeful. But I also recognize that because they left it open-ended, just because they nudge you in the direction of hopeful doesn't mean that that's actually what happened.
That is true.
So because I'm smart and this is an dystopian / apocalyptic movie, doesn't mean that it ends on a happy note, and most of them usually don't.
Right.
So,
I mean, for all we know, that boat sails on another like 100 yards and finds the Statue of Liberty on the shore. I mean, we don't know, right? I mean,
right.
Yeah. I agree. I think the ending is unbelievably ambiguous in that the whole movie, there is no evidence at all that the human project is real.
Right.
None.
It's all
There's
conjecture.
Zero. Yes, yeah. It's all people. It's all like a friend of a friend told me this type stuff, all urban legend kind of thing. And again, in that situation with what's going on in the world, it's totally plausible that something like that would be created because people need something to believe in. Yes. And, that would be, again, it would just start. Clearly, there's got to be some scientists somewhere that are working on this, right? And that simple idea gets mutated and thrown around and talked and telephone gamed until, it's this whole organization. They got a boat and everything, So, I mean, it totally could be that way. But it also, again, maybe they wanted to kind of give you a little something to hold on to that, it's not all doom and gloom and that, she's not going to die on this little boat out in the middle of the water there by herself, So again, I love it that it's totally up to the individual. What do you think? Is it real? Is she going to be saved? And also, are they going to be douchebags? We don't know.
Yeah, they could make it political just like the Fishes were going to. You don't know that.
So and I think Theo tells her at one point, when you get to them, when you're with them, never leave your baby, right? Always keep, you know what I mean? He's like kind of saying, be careful.
Yeah.
And so,
make sure.
So he, even there in that ending moment, he's kind of like, look, don't just go in there and think they're the heroes, right? Because you don't know. You don't know what they're going to do. And the only person that you have to watch out for is Dylan, is this little baby. That's it. So, but again, an incredible movie. So just unbelievable, like heart-stopping sequences where you're just like, holy crap, and again, dark as all get out, right? I mean, if people think Blade Runner is a dark dystopian, movie, which is set like
buckle up.
Blade Runner is like 8 years earlier than this, theoretically, right? 2019 is when Blade Runner happens, and this is 2027, I think. So kind of in the same ballpark, and this movie is unbelievably more grim than Blade Runner is.
Oh God, yeah. Oh yeah. I love this. I love this movie. And again, like I said, an ambiguous ending, great. Mm-hmm. I love a good open-ended ending.
Yeah,
that was hard to say.
I did. Yeah,
it's difficult.
Try doing it 5 times fast. I agree with the director in that I also am not. I don't like necessarily to have everything explained to me in movies.
No spoon feeding, please.
And don't get me wrong, I do like exposition because I do, you have to give us enough to figure out what's going on. But I'm totally happy when, they don't answer every question and they do leave things open to, it could be this and it could be that, and it's really what you think,
Right.
So.
And I think it's great because you should definitely have moments of like that in film, because the art is always subjective. You like a song that I don't like, and there's a piece of art that hits me that you're like, I don't dig that. You know what I mean? That's And by making films that don't tell you what to think and what to feel, and you have to come to those conclusions on your own, just further makes it an art form, you know, so that you have your own experience, you know, your own feelings about this movie. So anything that you think we sort of like glossed over that we didn't hit? I'm looking through some of my lines. There was a line I love where more of the graffiti, great line where it says avoiding fertility tests is a crime.
Yep.
Where that wasn't necessarily graffiti, that was more like state-run.
Yeah, that was like on the TV screens and stuff. Yeah,
all over the place. Love that. Let's see. I think that's really it. I think we did a good job of hitting all of my stuff here. Kind of hit most of your stuff too. Anything else you want to make sure we go across?
There's one little moment we didn't really talk about, and that is when Theo gets kidnapped. And in the beginning, he's thrown in the back of this van, and the van on the side, it's some kind of like plumber's van, and it's the name of the company is R. Holden and Sons. And so, I mean, literally, it's Children of Men is on the side of the van. And so I think that was just kind of a fun little in joke there. That if you saw that's they're referencing the title of the movie. So
I love it. It's so good. It's so good. Well, if we hit all of our points, I think we're good. I think we can stick a fork in this 3 hour.
Oh my God, we've been. I mean, yeah, it's crazy. We've been talking forever. So, what a great
that's
discussion.
the sign of a I know that's the sign of a good discussion about something that we both have really strong feelings about and really enjoyed, and I love that. I'm so glad that we were able to do that. So if we don't have anything else to talk about, should we go ahead and take a break?
Let's take a break and come back and go over stuff. All right.
Yeah,
so
let's
please,
do that.
Everyone, stick around. We'll be right back.
Hey there, this is Greg Nicotero, and you're listening to Aim for the Head podcast with Diana and Steve. And don't forget to always aim for the head, because body shots, they really just don't work.
Hey, everybody, we are back. First thing we're going to do is jump into our feedback and then just feedback and then just chat a little bit about what's coming up in our world, in our podcast, and when you're going to hear from us again. So let's jump right in. First off, we did get some feedback from our friend Andy from Germany for our last podcast, which if you haven't had a chance to listen, we had so much fun. We talked the original Hellraiser movie. So just, back up to the episode before this one. And we had a great chat, had a lot of fun, and Andy sent in some feedback after the fact. So thanks so much, Andy. So this is via the email, and he says, "Hello, Diana and Steve. 3 hours podcast for a 90-minute movie. Seems like you two are back in business," with a winky face. And I'm like, hey, you. We like to chat. What about it?
Yeah.
Notice
what are you saying?
What's your point? And this is also another, 90-minute movie in a 3-hour podcast. Shh. Don't tell anybody though. Okay. So
Maybe
he says
after
listening to this Halloween 2 podcast with Steve and now listening to yours in comparison, I noticed how excellent your audio quality is. Huh. Oh, is this the one you guest hosted on?
Yeah, I guessed that on the Bloody Essentials, and we went over Halloween 2 several months ago. So, yeah.
Okay. Oh, well, that was nice.
And, Andy, thank you so much for listening to it. That's
really I was
cool.
just going to say that was great for him to listen. That was cool. Thank you, Andy. He wrote in, plus how easy it is to understand your English. Okay.
Well,
Right. He says, I watched Hellraiser once long ago, but horror is not really one of my favorite genres, except if it's the modern fantasy style, like the Dead Boy Detectives I am watching at the moment. I hope you'll find something interesting to talk about for your podcast, so I won't have to wait till the end of September for your next episode. I'll definitely watch at least the start of Daryl's adventure in France. After all, I want to know if Carol shows up. She's in the title, dude.
It's the Book of Carol. She got to show up.
So, and I wouldn't want to miss the chance to hear your perfect French again. How dare you? The audacity. Greetings from Germany, Andy. Well, Andy, as always, thank you so much for writing in. And we don't really have any other Walking Dead content to talk about until Daryl Dixon comes back on. So hopefully you're listening to this and you hear our reaction to your great feedback. So great. And send in some feedback about this if you've seen Children of Men. And if you haven't seen it, you should, because it's a great movie.
Yeah, well, and again, since it's not horror, hopefully it's something that you're more open to. So it's a great movie, dude.
Yeah.
Totally great movie. You'll love it.
Absolutely.
Very uplifting.
Not bleak at all.
No, not at all.
At all.
Nope.
It's colorful even.
Yes.
Thanks as always for writing in, Andy. We love hearing from you, and we're with you. We can't wait for Daryl Dixon to start back up, and I look forward to speaking to you in a French accent once again.
We will. We will taunt you a second time.
Yes, we will tell you your mother smelled of elderberries. Yes.
Good
anyway.
Stuff.
Yeah.
All right. So moving along. Now the feedback we have here is all about Children of Men. So we're up to the one we just got done talking about. And our first bit of feedback comes from my pal, Liz Fulda. And I'm not sure if you've met Fulda. Maybe once or twice at like C2E2 or something.
Oh, maybe.
She is a like marketing guru, and she gets hired by companies to do their campaigns to advertise their products. She's well, I don't know if she still is, but she was working with John and Sandy Carpenter for their comic books. So I'm super jelly that she's like actually like met John Carpenter, or at least talked with him a lot, So
that's where I probably met her, because I think there was one year where Sandy Carpenter was there, and we went up to the booth there at C2E2, and I believe she was there then.
Yeah, I'm gonna say I want to say that you probably met her once. She's an amazing person. She's super talented. She's very cool. So she put in a comment, and this came via the Facebook, and I love it. She's so great. She's like, sequel to Idiocracy. That great documentary that came out. Yes, and then she follows that up with saying depressing and accurate as fork. And as fork are all caps. And yeah, I mean, absolutely, it is a very, very bleak worldview. So dead on, Liz. And I never really considered it a sequel to Idiocracy, but from now on I will.
That's where it goes. And I'm not sure about it being depressing.
Oh, come on.
She's wrong. No. It is.
I mean, it's so everyone has a happy ending, and yeah.
Oh yeah. For sure. Oh my God. Well, thank you for writing in, Liz. I really appreciate it, and I wasn't aware you were listening to the podcast. So great. Thanks for your feedback and following along. Yay! Next up, we got some feedback from our pal, frequent feedback giver, Alma Contreras. Hey, Alma. And what's funny is Alma had actually never seen this movie. And when we put our first few, like, hey, guess what's coming posts on social media, she said, oh, I've not seen this one before. I've never heard of it. And I've never seen this one before. And our podcast pal, Jason Capassi, thank you, Jason, for the save. Jason was like, it's great. And she went and she watched it.
She did.
And gave us feedback. She had never seen it before. And I think that's amazing.
That's incredible. Yeah.
I'm so excited. So these are very unfiltered thoughts from someone who literally just saw this movie for the very first time. So thanks, Alma. Alma says, okay, I watched it. She says, and she uses the really heavy crying emoji. She's like, such a dark and bleak movie. I was very upset that Theo died, but at least he got the girl and the baby Dylan to the ship. I couldn't get over how society spirals into violence, losing all their humanity. More crying emoji. And that's true. Like, it's, we've seen it in many, apocalypse dystopian-esque movies. The very first instinct is that narcissistic, I need to save myself. Yep. And to do that, I will do whatever I can to, it's.
So like always say in The Walking Dead, everybody that you meet, no matter how nice they seem, ultimately they want to kill you and take your stuff.
Yeah, fight the dead, but fear the living for sure. My God,
Exactly.
fear
Yep.
the living no matter what. So you're not wrong, Alma, and it's true. It's interesting how that's always the plot point in most of these apocalyptic / dystopian futuristic movies. Is part of the breakdown of society is that society spirals and the violence happens, and like she's saying, so it makes it extra bleak because the world is bleak, but then this stuff happens and you're like, great, we can't even count on humans. So yeah, thanks again for not only writing in, Alma, but for taking a chance and watching a movie just based on some thin recommendations there. And yeah, so you didn't really say whether you enjoyed it. You just mostly put the sad emojis and that it was very bleak and dark, which is true. But you're a Walking Dead watcher, so you should be prepared for those things.
Oh yeah. Come on. She loved it. She probably bought the poster and has it in her house now.
Yeah, I'm absolutely certain that happens. So, thanks for writing in, Alma. We look forward to hearing from you again. You're such a great contributor to the podcast. We appreciate it. Thank you.
We totally do. Thank you, Alma. That's great. All right, so moving on, we got a piece of feedback from another one of our longtime contributors, and that's Karen. I'm not related to Lauren Cohen. Yes. And this also came via the Facebook, so several Facebook comments. How interesting. And I love this. This feedback is so great. I mean, it is. It's so great. So she goes, this is what she said. She goes, on our first date, my husband took me to see this movie. And then she has a little dash. Little caveat. And we are still together.
I am so glad.
And she goes, I'll try to watch it again before you record so I can comment. And then she put the little smiley. But since I don't believe we got anything else, I'm guessing that might not have happened. But first of all, Karen, you got to give us a little bit more info. And the thing I want to know is, had your husband already seen the movie? And then he said, I think she would really like this on our first date. Or did you guys just go in blind? This is very important. But the fact that you were able to overcome this and you're still together is certainly a miracle as great as the birth of the baby in this movie.
Yeah. Well, one thing's for sure. I think, Karen, that you and your husband have now taken the title away from me and my wife, who previous to this, we were the people who saw the worst first date movie and are now still together. So it's amazing. But I think this might win. And for those playing at home, the movie that I saw, that I chose, I picked it as the first thing to do on our very first date was we went to see the Mark Wahlberg Planet of the Apes movie.
Oh, high quality trash.
Yes. Terrible.
That's a Tim Burton movie.
Yeah, it sure was.
I don't know if this will beat that or not, but in high school there was a girl that I really, really liked, and I finally got her to go out with me, and so I took her to go see The Hills Have Eyes Part 2. Ooh. As our first date movie, and I should say as our only date movie.
I was going to say, was there a date 2?
There was not. No, there was not. Yes, sadly, she did not enjoy that movie, and that movie is infamous in the fact that halfway through it, a dog has a flashback to the first The Hills Have Eyes. Yeah, That's right, people. So, yeah, anyway, I love hearing these kind of first date stories. It's always funny and interesting.
It makes you feel better about yourself and your life choices that you did.
Sometimes it does. Yeah, sometimes it does.
Yeah, what is it about the brain that just like, this seems like a great idea?
This is going to work out great.
This will totally be fine. I'm glad to hear, Karen, that you are still with your husband. And as Steve said, we might need a little more information. So feel free to write in and give us some more info when we sit on the next podcast.
Just to kind of flesh it out, Yeah,
everybody else is dying to know. Yeah. Dying to know. And you may have not watched it in time to get the feedback, but hopefully you get a chance to watch it and revisit that first date.
That's right.
I can tell you with absolute certainty, I have never watched that Planet of the Apes movie ever again.
Wow. Yikes.
Yeah, but this one could get a second watch. It just, you'd have to like approach it from a, this is not my first date movie. You'd have to just be like, this is a fantastic piece of cinema.
Mm. Oh, I think they should do it for date night.
Yeah. They could. They really could. I mean, if you really want to capture the past, this is the way to go. Nothing quite like a, dystopian, futuristic movie where fertility is a problem. I mean, sure. Nothing says celebration quite like that.
No.
Thanks again, everybody, for all your feedback. We really appreciate it. We always love this interaction that we get with our listeners. It's fantastic.
It is. It's so incredible. Thank you guys so much.
So next up, coming up on the podcast, the next known things that we will be covering is, obviously we've discussed, Daryl Dixon, the Book of Carol, where, yes, Andy, we really think that Carol is going to make an appearance there.
At least one.
I mean, just the title alone sort of points me in that direction. It doesn't come back until September 29th. And obviously you all know how to, look at the calendar. We've got a little bit of time here. We've sort of delved into this sort of apocalyptic zone. So maybe you'll be seeing a couple more of those before we hit Book of Carol. So sure. Keep connected to the socials. And when we do decide what the next thing is going to be, we'll follow sort of the same pattern we've been doing, where instead of just the posts looking for feedback, we'll try and like backtrack it by 4 or 5 days. And you can be a good human, just like Alma Contreras. And if it's something you've never seen before, it'll give you time to watch it.
There you go.
So yeah, but we'll give you plenty of notice and let you guys know whatever that is, and look forward to covering whatever that may be. And then again, Book of Carol, end of September on the 29th is when it premieres. We've got a couple of conventions coming up. We've mentioned before, Flashback Weekend is almost upon us. It's 2 weeks away.
Yep. August 2nd, 3rd, and 4th at the Hyatt Regency in Chicago, out in Rosemont here, right by the airport. If you're in the Chicagoland area, oh my God, it's unbelievable. There's this huge John Carpenter's The Thing cast reunion with six actors.
I can't wait.
I know. I'm selling a kidney this week.
No.
There's a huge reunion of the movie, the Walter Hill movie, The Warriors, with 7 of the Warriors, which is going to be amazing, including James Remar, which and Michael Beck. So a chance to meet some cool people there. The entire all 3 Raimi brothers are going to be there. So you have Sam Raimi, the director. You have Ted Raimi, who's an amazing actor, has been in a million things. And then their older brother, Ivan Raimi, who helped out in making the original Evil Dead. I believe Ivan is a doctor in real life, so I'm sure he's a really interesting dude as well. There is a Halloween 3 reunion with Tom Atkins and Stacey Nelkin. There is a Fog reunion with Tom Atkins and Adrian freaking Barbeau. There is from the original Halloween, Nick Castle is going to be here, was The Shape, as well as Nancy Stevens, who was the nurse Marion Chambers in Halloween 1 and 2, and I think she's in one of the remakes and gets killed later on down the line, like Halloween 6 or 7 or something. So yeah, there's a ton of other people too that are going to be there. I mean, it's like Michael Gross from Family Ties is going to be there, and of course Tremors, which is a great horror movie that he made with Kevin Bacon back in the day. I mean, it's incredible. Go to flashbackweekend.com to check out all the guests and to see about tickets and all that stuff. If you can only come one day, you can just buy a one-day ticket. You can buy a weekend pass, whatever. It's going to be unbelievable. This is the biggest Flashback I've ever seen in terms of guests. It's just crazy. So yeah, super excited.
The list is super long. There's these great reunions. There's also, they get these really interesting, from all different walks of life, like horror movies, cult movies, et cetera. And it's just such a great grouping of people. And so you have these, like we said, these reunions, but you may have just like a one-off one person from something else, and there's just such a great mixture, and good events too, because there'll be some panels to go to, really great merchandise to spend some more dollars.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, whatever, sell the other kidney, you'll be fine.
Yeah, you don't need those. I
fine.
forgot. Yeah, the other thing, Alan Howarth is going to be there. Alan Howarth composed a lot of the music for John Carpenter's movies, and on Saturday night they're going to have a screening of Halloween 3, and he is going to play the score live, which is going to be unbelievable. So yeah, again, it's going to be an incredible weekend, and then literally like 2 weeks later is Fan Expo. We're going to come right back to the area. It's next door. It's at the Donald E. Stevens Convention Center, and
it's just huge.
Oh, it is.
It's so huge.
It's like San Diego Comic-Con. Obviously not as big as San Diego, but in that ilk. And it's the headliner, the main guest that everyone's losing their minds over is Luke Skywalker. Mark Hamill's coming. It's yeah. We made a decision very early on that we knew that our wallets could not survive a Mark Hamill encounter. No.
Even if we pooled money, we couldn't have done it. But they were doing a Mark Hamill like speaking event, like a panel event. And obviously the VIPs would be able to get in and get preferential seating. And then they took like a big portion of the room, like say another 150 seats, and they sold those at a certain price. And those were the silver package. And then once those are in, then they'll fill in with as many general admission as they can. And you can see it for free, but you're not guaranteed the seat. Well, we opted for the silver package, which was it $20, $25?
Like 30, $29.99
I think 30.
or something.
I think it was 29. You're right. You're right. So we were like, this is the best money we'll spend because it'll guarantee us a seat. And so we won't really have to wait in as much of a line as the general admission. We're guaranteed a seat because we paid for it. And then we'll be able to see Mark Hamill, and it'll be the cheapest one out of all of it.
There you go.
Yeah, so we opted in really early to do that one. So many posts we keep seeing from people that are that are able to get in and do the photo ops and the autograph sessions with Mark Hamill. And then they just recently announced, to go along with it, that Hayden Christensen is also going to be there. And they're going to do, of course, father-son photo ops and things where they're together as a duo, which is very interesting. So that's like the big one. And then there's all these other ones. I mean, Linda Hamilton's going to be there. Yep. There's a couple of the Charmed girls are going to be there. Very, very sadly, Shannon Doherty was supposed to go. And obviously with her passing away, which is just terrible, clearly that's not happening. But
way to bring us down there, kid.
I'm sorry. But the other Charmed gals are going to be there. And I think that's lovely that they're still going to be coming, even though they are in mourning, obviously. And just all these really great, like from all walks of life, because, Fan Expo is not like, unlike, Flashback, where it's sort of horror / cult movie themed. This is sort of like everything from pop culture. So there's tons of, just like CTE2 would have, they've got tons of like voice actors from anime and things like that. And you name it, like the list is as long as my arm, all these people that are coming. Half of them I don't know because I don't watch anime. So, and a lot of the sort of newer shows and things like that. So there's a lot of names that I don't know, but you guys probably do. So it's fantastic. That's going to be a very busy weekend.
Oh my God. Yeah. And I think if you're interested in going, tickets are on sale, and there is a discount on them that is going to expire soon. Yes. And maybe it already has, I can't remember, but there is a point where like, you know, if you want to get like a weekend pass now, it'll be cheaper than if you get one, you know, at the show. So if you are thinking of going, you should at least go to the website and see what the prices are and what the prices will become, because that might influence your decision. So, and again, it's Fan Expo, Chicago 2024. If you Google that, you'll find that. And I think it's just fanexpo.com, but I don't know that for sure. But it's gonna be an incredible show. It's gonna be amazing. Again,
it really
so
is.
Many cool people to see, and shopping and all that stuff.
To me, like, I always think too, like, Fan Expo does such a great job of getting such a large number of celebs. And there's they obviously they have the diamond ones like Mark Hamill, et cetera, who will probably be behind a curtain somewhere so that you can't see him.
Yeah.
But there are hundreds of other people that you are going to be able to see them. We're going to walk up and down aisles, and there's going to be, people from, 80s movies and things like that, those are the things that blow my mind, is just like casually walking around a con and someone that you've known for like decades is like right over there, some famous person, whoever it may be. And it's crazy. So that's going to be a great weekend. We are so looking forward to that as well. Another, that'll be a big wallet. It's all going to fall out of the wallet eventually. So,
oh my God, that's what I'm going to sell my other kidney.
Yes. And then after that, it's dialysis, right? That's the next step. You have to start bringing that dialysis machine everywhere. Okay.
That's cheap, right?
Yeah, sure. You'll be fine. It's all going to be fine. And just to sort of update people on things that we're watching, last time we chatted, The Boys was back on and the finale happened, and it's just, oh my God, this show is so good. I can't wait they have announced that the next season will be the last one though. So I'm sad for that, but it's just been so fantastic. This season was really great. Are you up to date on The Boys?
I am not, no.
You are not? Oh, well, you should be. Are you still watching The Acolyte?
I finished The Acolyte, yeah, and I just haven't gotten around to watching The Boys. Acolyte was good. Again, I think it was like, did we need that story? Probably not, but it was fun.
Yeah. That's probably what I've heard the most of from people is that it was good, that it was fun. It wasn't fantastic, but mostly it's, did we need to have the story? Who knows? So
yeah.
Well, that's interesting. That's good to hear. What's funny is I actually watched. I dove back into something that was from years ago, and now that it's not part of the zeitgeist, I decided to watch it. So I watched all of the Squid Game finally.
Right.
I had never watched it before. Yeah. It's that movie that is twisted. That series.
It is,
and I can't believe they're going to do another
show. One. Yeah, I know. They're right. I think they're either in post or are almost done with production. So yeah, it's gonna be nuts. Yeah. Well,
it is gonna be nuts.
I heard Jensen Ackles, of course, is on The Boys. Right now, and one of the things I heard is that apparently they're going to reboot. What I heard was that for the next season, the last season, they're going to bring in Padalecki. They're going to bring in
just so the whole crew can be there.
Yeah, so you'll have Jeffrey Dean Morgan, you'll have Jensen Ackles and Jared Padalecki. So and it hasn't been like officially confirmed, but a lot of people involved say it's totally going to happen. So
even if he just passes them on the street.
Yeah,
he doesn't even need to have like a named character.
Right.
Right. That'd be hilarious.
And he was doing that Walker Texas Ranger reboot on the CW, and that show they ended it after this third season that just wrapped up. So he is available. So I think that's when it started, and pretty much everyone has said, oh yeah, it's totally gonna happen. So that'll be fun. That'll be fun.
That'll be great. Other than that, we look forward to figuring out what our next thing's going to be. As always, we'll take suggestions. We got a couple of ideas bopping around of what we're going to do next. But until then, as always, I'm Diana.
And I'm Steve.
And don't forget to always aim for the head.
Because, trust me, even after 3 hours, body shots, they just don't work.
To send us an email, write us at aimfortheheadpodcast@gmail.com. And our Twitter handle is @AFTHpodcast. Pictures and video are always welcome at our Instagram account, Aim for the Head Podcast, all one word. But the best way to keep in touch with us is to just like our Facebook page to get all of our updates in your feed.
I'm not going to pull your finger.